Welcome, everybody. So great to see people coming on. Just love you to pop in the chat box where you're from, what time it is in that part of the world right now. And as you can see, we've only got just over 7 minutes before we start. I'm so excited about this and looking forward to what we've got coming. Okay, count it down with me. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're live.
Welcome to the Emotional Intelligence Online Summit. We are thrilled to have your attendance here, and we're looking forward to sharing with you a whole host of expert speakers that are going to help you navigate your way through the current pandemic that we're experiencing. But to kick off, let me introduce you to the man behind this whole summit, who's brought it all together, gathered all the speakers, and invited you to participate in it. His name is Grant Herbert. Now, Grant's a friend of mine and has been for quite some time, but he describes himself as an ordinary guy with a great wife and 5 amazing kids. But he has a passion to help people escape the performance trap, regain their authenticity, and enjoy being who they are created to be in every area of life. And Grant's a real talent when it comes to the understanding and the application of emotional intelligence. He was named Emotional Intelligence Speaker and Trainer of the Year. He has a host of other awards. He has his own podcast show. He's able to navigate all of us with his expertise in emotional intelligence, positive psychology, and applied neuroscience. His practical experience and his passion for people's wholeness, wellness, and formation actually allows us to really lean in and look forward to him being the opening speaker of this conference. He's a multi-award winning leader. He's an entertaining and engaging communicator, and I'm sure you will look forward to Grant Herbert's presentation right now.
Well, hey, we're live. Welcome to the Emotional Intelligence Online Summit for 2020. Thank you so much, Rowan. I really appreciate those kind words, and now I will hopefully live up to them. I need people to understand from the word go. I am an emotional intelligence subject matter expert. I'm a work in progress in its implementation, just like you. And we're going to have some fantastic fun. I've already been having some chats in the chat area with lots of people. And I would love you to just help me out right now and just say hi in the chat and let me know where you're from and what time it is. I'm amazed at the commitment already of people who are up at midnight, 3 a.m., whatever it is. And that means that you're going to get the most out of it. So well done. Let me just have a look down here. And I understand that there is a 20-second delay from when I speak to you hearing it on the feed. So I need to, as all our speakers will today, I need to be mindful of that. So Yoga Fun Kids, I know who that is. Well done, Connie. Great to see you here. Hello, good to see. So let me just make sure that everyone can hear me. So great. 7 a.m. in Brisbane. Fantastic. Good morning up the road in Sydney. Hey, Claire, great to see you. Yasmin, down in Melbourne. You guys have been doing it tough down in Melbourne, and things are going to brighten up really, really soon. So we're going to do what we can to help you with that over the next couple of days. Joining from Sydney. Fantastic. All right. So what about my people all around the world? You've all gone quiet on me. Where are you from? And say hi. That would be fantastic. Yes, hi from Croatia. There is an amazing amount of people from Croatia registered, and that's because Ivana is one of our awesome speakers for the summit. And yeah, she's going to do a really, really great job. I'm so blessed to have her here. Hi from the Czech Republic. It's 10 p.m. Excellent. Love that. All righty. So I just want to give you a little bit of an overview about the summit first before I get into my session. And I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of effort that's gone into making this happen. And I want to tell you why I created this summit. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Grant Herbert, as Rowan said. And up until March this year, when my entire life changed, I got the privilege of traveling around the world and speaking to people just like you in venues and, you know, putting on these sort of summits all over the world. Now, unfortunately, this year we couldn't do that. And I had a lot of changes that I had to do just like everybody else. And I had things going on, and I sort of stepped back a little bit and said, you know what, I'm probably not going to do it this year. It's too hard. Yes, I am a subject matter expert, as I said, but I'm a human. No one's perfect, right? And I was having a bit of a bad day about it. So I was just thinking about it. It was just sitting on my heart. And I said, you know what, Grant, put your big boy pants on and make it happen. And within a few days, I had got together 13 amazing speakers who were willing to give up their time to come and speak to you and to run our summit as an online summit. Now, one thing I want you to know right off the bat, I am not using the word virtual. And I'll tell you why. You know, not just because it's being overused everywhere, right? I'm not using the word virtual because, and here's the first teaching for the day, virtual means it's not real. You know, it's close, but it's not real. Well, let me tell you, the information and implementation that you're going to get over the next 2 days is real. It's not virtual. And one of the things that I learned early on in this pandemic situation that we're in right now is that what I do is not changing. It's just how I do it that's changing. So I'm calling it an online summit. So last year we had it in a venue. This year we're doing it online. Let me tell you, sometimes out of adversity, you know, comes the seed of a greater opportunity, as we've all heard before, because we have people on this summit registered from every continent, from countries all around the world. And if I had to put that summit on in the live venues that we did, that wouldn't have happened because I can't be everywhere. So therefore, I only ran it in certain places around the world. So I'm really, really excited about that. So that's why I created the summit, because right now we could all do with a little bit more emotional intelligence, a little bit more positive psychology in our life, a little bit more of an understanding of what's going on in our brain and our body. And that's why we're talking about those 3 topics in this summit over the next 2 days. And, you know, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence and, you know, how we can use that to feel and navigate this time in our life right now. Now, here's the thing. We're going to do our best not to mention the C word, and the C word is COVID-19, right? It gets way too much airplay. Because what we're going to be doing over the next couple of days is not just about now. This is about going beyond COVID-19. And this is my hashtag I've been using all year, beyond COVID-19. By the way, if you do want to let people know where you are and tell them about this on your social media, just use the hashtag EI Summit 2020, and that will keep us all together. This is about giving you practical skills that we needed before, during, and beyond this pandemic. So I just want to thank my team. I want to thank my speakers. My team over the last few days have been thinking, well, we'll just leave him alone, particularly yesterday. We had major technical difficulties yesterday. And hey, if we have those technical difficulties at all today, let's not worry about it, because I'm recording everything and we're going to make sure that everyone gets a copy of those recordings or is able to get to those recordings. So the other thing about that is that some of you right now are really, really committed, right? I don't know if I would be up at 2 a.m. To listen to me, but you are, right? And that's fantastic. However, others are having a sleep, and that's a good thing. That's self-care. And with that, I've created it in a way that we're able to cover the different time zones around the world. So we've got a session this morning, which goes for 3 hours. And I say this morning because it's morning here in Sydney, Australia. It's 8 a.m., right? We started. So from 8 till 11 and whatever that is. And for some of you in the United States, for example, that's yesterday for you. You're still in yesterday, right? And then there's a big gap through the day because people have got stuff to do. And then at 5 p.m. this afternoon, we're going to jump on again. And we're going to do another 3 hours. And that suits the other time zones as well. And we're going to repeat that again tomorrow. So with that, that means that if you miss anything, right, you're going to see it again in the replays. You're going to be able to grab that. And hey, if you're listening to this after you've done the the other session, if you're ahead of this, that's okay too. You're still going to be able to put all this together and say hi and let us know where you're from as well. So the last thing before I get into it is, as I've mentioned before, there's a 20-second delay. So as our speakers are speaking, you're going to see things if they share a slide or something like that. You're going to see it, a little bit after they have popped it up, which is okay. And then they'll speak, and that's fine. So your questions and comments that you make, we'll do our best to sync those together. But hey, just on questions, what I'd really love you to do, you can keep talking in the chat. Now the chat, please bear with me with the chat, because I wanted to make sure that I didn't have a heap of other people doing mediation, moderation of the chat. So I want to answer your questions. I want to make sure that I feed those questions to the speakers, and, whether that's a good idea or not, we'll find out. However, can we please just keep it on topic, right? Anything in the chat that's not about what we're doing here and it's not a question, it's not appropriate. So I'd really ask you to help me with that. And secondly, we're going to have times within the speakers after they've spoken, we're going to have times to answer questions, right? So I've made sure that this is not one of those back-to-back-to-back type things. This is a session where we got, a 5-minute break for having a comfort stop in between sessions. And I've made sure that there's time then between speakers so that we can make sure that they're on and get the technical side of it done. And more importantly, get, some time for questions. So write your questions down, keep them until I call for questions, so that then you're throwing them in the chat box and I'm pointing down to where I can see that, and I'll be able to find them. All right, and we'll do our best to answer all those questions. And hey, I'll get the chat roll. If I don't get to answer all the questions, I'll probably do some of my lives around those topics coming on. All right, we're ready to go. We're ready for this first speaker. And guess what? It's me. So hopefully, let me just check in the chat now. It's still people saying it's 27th of October here. We've got people from Albania. Thank you so much for organizing. What else? Nigeria, welcome Nigeria, Minneapolis, Chicago, Melbourne, Darling Downs in Queensland, Lisbon, Portugal, Czech Republic, Croatia. There's people everywhere. So just keep those going. I'm actually going to just close that down a little bit so that I can't see it during my actual talk myself, because with the delay, it's really weird. Hang on a minute, I'm talking, but it's not coming out. So let's get into it. I want you to know me in this. I want you to know my heart. I want you to know more about me before we get into, the how-to and the stuff that I'm going to give you. And I am definitely going to give you some practical things that you can apply in your life right now. And just with me and every other speaker, here's what I want you to do. When we're telling you a story to illustrate a point, it's not about our story. It's about putting yourself in the story. What is your story? How does that contextually relate to you? That's the first thing. The second thing is for you to get one thing, Set yourself a goal to get one thing out of each of the speakers that will help you in your life right now. This isn't about just giving you heaps of information. This is about giving you practical strategies that you can use. So I want to start off by being really vulnerable. You know, when I was 15 years of age, which is a while ago, right? When I was 15 years of age, I found out something that had happened in my childhood some time ago, when I was 6 months old, actually, that changed my life for many, many years. See, I found out that my mum back then, when I was 6 months old, put me on a doorstep and left me there. And she went home. And when I found that out at 15 years of age, I had a pity party for the next 25 years. See, it's not what happens to us in life that matters, it's what we make it mean. Now, I made it mean if a mother could leave their child at 6 months old on a doorstep, surely she didn't love me. And therefore, nursed and rehearsed over a period of time as I continually let that inner dialogue rule my life, I changed that to, therefore, you are unlovable. And let me tell you, that became a self-fulfilling prophecy in my life for those 25 years and a little bit more. You see, Dad comes home from work and said, "Where's the baby?" And Mum told him the story, right? And he goes down there to see if he can get me back. And guess what? I'm still on the doorstep. Not only did my mother not want me, the people where she left me didn't want me either. And I let that story tell me stuff about myself, which led to me having some beliefs about myself, which would hold me back from being who I could have been and was born to be for many, many years. See, here's the rest of the story, the bit that I left out. The rest of the story is my mum was not well when she had me. You know, back 58 years ago, a little bit longer, I was born premature. I had some developmental issues and difficulties, and Mum was going through what we now know is called postnatal depression. Back then, it was, hey, here's your baby, good luck, see ya. We didn't know about that thing. So here's the real story. My mum didn't feel in her then mental state that she was able to give me the life that she wanted me to have. You see, it wasn't that my mum didn't love me. My mum loved me so much that she was willing to give me up so that I could have the life that she didn't think that she could give me. Now, when I was 15, I heard both sides of the story, but why was it that I grabbed onto the negative, the story of she didn't love me, therefore I'm not lovable, and not go to the real story or to the one that was true? Why did I form that false belief based on the negative evidence that I chose to believe? And I'll tell you why. It's because when I was 15, at that point of my life, I didn't feel worthy anyway. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I didn't feel like I was good enough. I didn't feel like anyone could love me because I surely didn't love myself. And that became my belief structure going forward. It's not what happens in life, remember, it's what you make it mean. So what is it that's going on for you right now? What is it that you're believing about yourself, which is not true? What is it that you're believing about your current circumstances and your ability to navigate them that is not true? So over many years, that had an effect on my career, it had an effect on my relationships, and it certainly had an effect on my confidence and my ability to be who I needed to be in every area of my life. And I went through a military career and a corporate career, holding on to this belief about myself. Now, out of that, I now know that I was suffering from what I call the performance trap. And I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit shortly. I was constantly seeking to not get rejected. And here's the thing, whatever we're seeking to do, if we're focusing on the rejected, see, the brain doesn't hear the not, the don't. It hears what it is that we're focusing on. So in not being rejected, I was becoming someone who was pushing people away. But it wasn't really working the way that I wanted it to. And over a period of years, I suffered from stress, from anxiety, from, just not enjoying life, putting on this faith to everybody else that, hey, I'm doing fantastic. Look at me. I am, an achiever. I work hard and I've got all these skills and I've got all that. And everything that I did to prove myself to other people. Now, in the work that I get to do all around the world now, as a coach, as a mentor, this is a common thread that I'm coming across, and it could be common for you right now. So I want to give you an encouragement, and my whole purpose for telling you that story is not so that you can feel sorry for me or feel bad for me. It's to enlighten you about where you might be believing things about yourself that's not serving you as well. See, stress and conflict, internal conflict with who you are, all these things, they play a big toll. And I stand before you as someone who has had 4 physical and 1 mental breakdown in their life. And you're probably thinking, well, or you could be thinking, I shouldn't say probably, you could be thinking, well, what are we listening to this guy for? What's he going to teach us? See, the best gift that I can give you and that I give my clients is my experiential journey of what I did, what I learned, what I've changed, what I'm doing differently now because I've learned this stuff. And, it was a beautiful day in Sydney. I can remember a number of years ago, and I traveled into the city. I live about 50 kilometers from the city. I traveled into the city on the train. Like I just live in a rural area right on the outskirts of Sydney because I'm originally from the bush, and you can take the boy out of the bush, but you can't take the bush. Sorry. Yeah, you take the boy out of the bush, but you can't take the bush out of the boy. And I love to just be on the train and to go in there. And I remember I was on the 27th floor of a building in Pitt Street, Sydney, in this beautiful boardroom. And I was doing what I love to do. I was teaching, I was training a group of executives around emotional intelligence. And I had a smile on my face and I was doing my thing and I was animated and I was giving my passion like I'm doing with you right now. And then all of a sudden, this feeling of dread came over me. And it was like, even though the sun was shining through the window, it was like a black cloud just descended upon me. And I didn't know what was going on. But instead of exercising self-care and going, well, hang on a minute, I need to have a break here and see what's going on, what did I do? What I did was I just kept smiling and I just kept going and I just kept giving my best. And I just kept thinking about everybody else in the room rather than myself. You see, I did that because I cared way too much about what other people thought of me. Eleanor Roosevelt said it so well. What other people think of you is none of your business. And in fact, she went on to say that no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And I was certainly allowing other people to make me feel the way that I was feeling. I was choosing to feel that way. So I kept that smile on my face. I finished, back then we were allowed to shake hands. I shook hands with people. I thanked them. They walked me to the elevator. I got in the elevator, and as that elevator door closed, I went, what is happening? Am I having a heart attack here? Am I going to make it home today? And it was at that point I decided that things had to change. And I had several meetings still to go that day, and I just forgot about them all. I got in the train, I went home. And I made a decision from that day. Even though I'd worked on these areas and I've already was an expert working around the world in emotional intelligence, this stuff was going on. And I made a decision that if I was going to be able to continue to do that, I needed to make some change in my life. And I've done that. Looking at this situation where things have changed in my life. I used to be out of the country every month, but now I haven't been anywhere since March 1st. I flew back into Sydney. And I look at that as a positive thing now, because I've been able to spend way more time at home with my family, with myself. I have a commute. This morning, my commute was huge. It took me about 14 seconds to come from my kitchen, where I finished my cup of tea, to come into my studio and to do this. So I made a decision to change my life. So right now, what is it that you could change in your life so that you started exercising self-care? So let me tell you a little bit about finding emotional intelligence. By the way, when I found out this emotional intelligence thing that we're talking about today, I'd never heard of it. Most people had heard of, things like Daniel Goleman's book, funnily enough, called Emotional Intelligence, but I hadn't heard of it. I certainly found out, or knew once I knew what it was, that I didn't have any. I hadn't developed those skills. And I really wish now that people had invested in me in my corporate career, in my military career, with these subjects. See, what happens a lot is we teach technical skills and we get people's abilities in those areas where they need to be. So we don't worry about these warm and fuzzy soft skills that they call them. We all know that these are the ones that create all the problems, all the conflict. So I remember I got out of the corporate world and I decided that I would start my company, People Builders. And, it's a great name. I love the name because that's what I do. I love to build people up and help them to bring out their personal best. And, I started, it was just me. And I went and got some, extra training, even though I'd been coaching and training and leading people for many years in the roles that I had in defense and corporate. I wanted to formalize that. And, and even in that, I was, thinking about, well, no one's going to listen to me if I don't have a qualification and all those sort of things. So the performance trap was still running. But what I did is got involved in this whole world of developing others. And I was going along and things were going really great. And I was, helping people to change their lives and I was feeling, fulfilled. And I came across this thing called emotional intelligence. In fact, I came across what's called social and emotional intelligence. And I thought, wow, this sounds interesting. And I'd sort of, by those times, I'd heard a little bit about it. So I then got involved and I then did a lot of research and I wanted to get trained and certified in this so that I could help others with it as well as help myself. And I came across this amazing lady who you're going to get to meet after me this morning. I'm just so thrilled to be able to share Dr. Laura Belson with you. She's my mentor. She's my guru. She's my person that I look to as being the person who started my journey in what it is that I'm doing now. And I got involved, and the thing that it did is it firstly helped me to change my life. And in all the training and stuff that I do, and even our certification program, when I take people through, I say to them, get it for you first. Give yourself the gift of learning these competencies before you even look at others. And I went from that about 8 years ago now, I think it was, to now where, as Rowan said, at the start of this year, I got named Emotional Intelligence Speaker and Trainer of the Year. I've physically been in about 25 countries, doing the work in many, many more countries online. And it's been an amazing journey to the place where now I get to train, mentor, and certify other coaches and trainers and HR professionals all around the world doing the same thing. And it's been a really great journey. And as you can see, it's my passion because it was my key to overcome the performance trap. So this performance trap thing is where we perform to get approval. Performing's okay. I'm performing right now, but I'm not performing to get your approval. I'm performing to serve you. My focus is on you, and there's the difference right there. But when we perform to get the approval of others, we don't always get it. And when we don't get it, even if we've done the best job that we can do, it erodes our identity. You see, my performance is what I do. My identity is who I believe I am. My mother left me on a doorstep, therefore I am unlovable. My mother didn't love me, therefore I'm not worthy. You know, I don't know if you're a parent, you know someone that's a parent, or you've been a kid yourself, but hey, parents are not perfect. And by the way, perfect's never the goal. Perfection is never the goal. And I'm not a perfect parent, and it's never going to happen, right? So I remember, in the first times when I was getting my business started and everything, my practice started, I had two little kids who have now grown up, and they're in their, in Australia here, their high school certificate, they're just finishing their exams, they're 18 years of age and they're adults now. And it's like, they used to be these tiny little babies that I could hold in one arm, and twins, a boy and a girl. And I remember trying to get out of the house in the morning and trying to get off to what it is that I was doing. And I was really concerned that I was not going to get there on time. So I was focused not on my kids, I was focused on where I was going that morning. And I remember getting to the point sometimes with my daughter Tegan, where I would, go from, hey, Tiggy, where are you going? What are you up to the fact that we're going to get out of here right now, right? So in that moment, my emotional state led me to say, Tegan, get out of here now. And I yelled at my child. Raise your hand if you've yelled at your child ever. And when it's someone that we love, 14 milliseconds later, we've got this horrible feeling in the pit of our stomach. I didn't want to yell at my child, but I wasn't focused on the child. I was focused on performing for my client. And that changed who I was. And nursed and rehearsed all the way down to that first appointment. I went from I yelled at my child to therefore I am a bad father. That's the performance trap. Let me help you to reverse that and turn it around on itself. See, performing's okay. But when we perform to get the approval, that's the problem. So here's what we do. We develop our emotional intelligence, particularly the competency that I do the most work in, that's personal power. And we build our own identity. We get rid of those negative beliefs, those false beliefs, those limiting beliefs of who we think we are based on our previous experiences and what people have said into our life that we've made true for ourselves. We take responsibility for those. And we go, you know what? That's not who I am. I'm going to define who I am. See, I love doing this for you right now. I hope you like me, but it's not what I'm doing it for. It's not my motive. So when we build up our identity, here's the key right now. Get ready for this. When we build up our own identity, instead of performing to get approval, we get to a position of self-approval, where we're okay with who we are. Yes, we're still teachable. Yes, we know there's things we're working on, but we look in the mirror, and I'm not just talking about physically, but in every area we're going, you know what, I'm happy with you. And we get to that position, and that's what emotional intelligence can do. It can get you that position of self-approval. And then instead of performing to get the approval of others, what we can do is get to that position of self-approval and then perform out of that. Let me tell you, it might sound like semantics in terms of, the words. It's a totally different way to live. Because right now I'm up here doing this for you, and I'm not concerned about anyone but you. I'm not concerned about what you're thinking about me or all those. I'm concerned about getting this message across to you and helping you to change your life. So I'm just going to have a quick look in here. Someone saying, I've been feeling the same dark cloud. It's a dark place. Thanks for sharing your story. And hey, yeah, I appreciate your thanks. And I've got to just turn that down again now because I want to get into the chat, but I'll get into that shortly. But here's the thing: when you get to that position of self-approval, it's okay for me to tell you that story or my stories, because I tell you them not to make you feel sorry for me, but I tell them about you to empower you with the lessons that came out of them for me. However, if I was trying to get your approval, I'm the expert coach who travels the world. I'm not going to tell you stories about when I broke down and when I was less than. But I find that vulnerability and being real with people is what really helps me. And by the way, taking off the mask and being who I really am, that's a much easier gig, team. Trying to, remember who I was trying to be to those people the last time I was there and what mask I was putting on, that creates even more stress. All right, so what is this thing called emotional intelligence? Indeed, social and emotional intelligence. So social and emotional intelligence is the ability to be aware of your own emotions and what might be going on in the emotions of others in the moment. And then to use that information to manage yourself and manage your relationships. So if we then look at just the emotional intelligence side of that, it's about becoming self-aware around what's going on for you in the moment. So what I want you to do right now, and I'll have a look at them a bit later, but I just want you to go through it right here, right now. I want you to type in the chat roll, what is the emotion you're going through? One word. I don't need the story around it. What's the word? And as you're doing that, I need us to understand that there are over 2,000 words in the English language alone to describe an emotion that we could be going through in any moment. Yet we carry around about 6 to 10. You know, we're either happy or we're sad. You know, we're either frustrated or we're angry. You know, we even say things like, oh, I feel tired. See, an emotion is something that we experience viscerally, that then creates by our thoughts and by our behavior a longer term feeling, which leads to the mood that we're in. So the ability firstly to be aware. So that's the first thing, it's an ability. So you can learn these skills. Secondly, it's an ability to be aware of what's going on. What's the emotion? Let me just see what people are typing in. People are going gratitude, joy, excited, peace, angst, stress, excited, anxious, overwhelmed, joy. Yeah, so to help us with that, all right, I'm just mindful of the time. To help us with that, we need to be able to language it this way. I feel, insert what the emotion is, that one word right now. Or I am feeling, whatever the word is, right now. So I am feeling peaceful. I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling content. So that's the first step. And then, just like coming on this summit, the only value that you're going to get from this summit is when you take what you're learning and then you use it. Knowledge without action is more frustrating. You know, if I had learned about this emotional intelligence thing and then did nothing with it, I would still be back here. In fact, I'd be worse off because it would frustrate me. Forget who said it, but to know and not to do is not to know. So we take what we're learning from that emotion. We learn how to navigate that emotion by, as I said, working out which emotion we're going through first. And then when the emotion level is low, so we recognize in the moment that we might be feeling, for example, in a relationship situation, a conversation, we might be feeling misunderstood. So instead of waiting until we get up here where we're frustrated or where we end up getting angry, we deal with the emotion here when we're feeling misunderstood. You know, the brain is my brain, that's not my brain, but I use that all the time in my training. And, you know, in our brain, the way that we express or we navigate that emotion will determine whether we go from, or we make a decision then from our logical brain or from our emotional brain. And most of the times in my life, I was just reacting emotionally. You know, people say don't overreact. I've got a distinction around that. I believe the goal is to respond. Respond is something that's logical. Any reaction to an emotion, I believe, is it's not necessary. So instead of overreacting, which says it's okay to react, I want to get to respond. So we use that information to manage ourselves. And what I want to do, as I'm finishing up here, is I want to give you a strategy. I want to give you a strategy that you can take and you can use it so that you, in those situations, can get control over your emotional response. Put your hand up right now if you react every now and then. If your emotions that you're experiencing lead you to a negative behavior. All right. Yeah, I can't see you obviously, but there's hands going up all around the world, you know, and mine's up there too. So here's the thing. The first thing we want to do to manage our emotions. By the way, emotions are good. We don't want to suppress them. We don't want to ignore them. We want to experience them in a healthy way. Emotions are there for a reason. They're cues and clues to tell us what's going on internally so that we can then change our direction, change our thinking, do what we need to do to get a favorable response. So if anyone's ever told you, leave your emotions at the door, don't bring your emotions to work, it's impossible. We are emotional beings. So the first thing we want to do, as I've said, is we want to name the emotion. So we've all heard of this, you know, oh, count to 10, just count to 10. So give yourself some space before you react, before you respond. And that's a good thing. You know, counting to 10, you know why it's such a good thing? It's not just because it gives you 10 seconds of space. Counting is a logical process. So you know what it does? It actually lights up the neocortex. I am a neuroscience nerd, and I'm so excited that we've got a neuroscientist coming on tomorrow. We've got applied neuroscientists later today, and it's just, yeah. So if you're into neuroscience, you're in for a treat. So we name the emotion and we ask ourselves the question, what is the emotion I'm going through right now? By using the word what rather than why am I feeling this way, we've invoked the logical part of our brain rather than gone deeper into the emotion. So not worrying about why at this point, what is the emotion that I'm feeling? The second part of the process, once we've identified that, is to then go and do an audit of our thoughts. And the word audit is a logical process. You know, if you get audited, they go through the fine detail. So we ask ourselves the question, what is my thoughts right now? What am I thinking right now? What is my internal dialogue saying right now? So we're gathering information. And the reason we do that is so that we can then take it and look at it logically. And we can either dispel the myth, debunk the negative or the untruth that we're thinking. We can bring it up into a logical. We can put it into perspective so that we don't spiral down into the emotion. So name the emotion, audit your thoughts. And hey, I have great conversations with myself, and you know, we've all got this internal thoughts, this mini me that we've created. And I'll have conversations with myself when I'm feeling this way, and I'll go, hey, Grant, hey, that's not true. This is true. So do whatever you've got to do to get yourself to that point. The third thing we want to do, because we've now put ourselves in a more favorable position to be able to think clearly and logically, is decide on the outcome that we want. So if I'm feeling a certain way or something's happening and I want to it not to be that way, we can ask ourselves the question, what do I want to happen right now? What do I want to see happening differently? So name the emotion, and then just going to admit Laura into the waiting room. My apologies for 2 seconds. If I could get my cursor to work, that would be really great. Yeah, so name the emotion, audit your thoughts, decide on the outcome, and then the fourth one is control the sabotage. Now, when I show this in my trainings, I've got this slide of this guy with a piece of duct tape over his mouth. I'm not recommending that you do that, but whatever you do, ask yourself the question, what could I say or do right now that would stop me from getting that outcome? Now we can flip that the other way and go, what could I say and do right now to move towards that outcome? We're going through a logical process. I hope you're writing this down. And then number 5, and we've gone through a 4-step process so that we are ready for this, is to then choose our response strategy. The reason this works now is that we have come up out of the emotion, we're looking at it logically, we've dispelled the myths, we've quietened down the thinking. We've focused in from all this overwhelm to one thought that we're having right now. We're getting one piece of information of what's my next step. And then we're able to choose a strategy that will move us to that next step. So that's a 5-step process that we teach when we are helping people with their behavioral self-control, which is one of the 26 competencies of social and emotional intelligence. So let me just check in with you right now. I'm just looking at a number of things here. I want to see what insights that you've got out of that, and then I'm going to take your questions. All right, so just type it in there, please. I didn't, the second strategy. All right, so I'll go through them again. Name the emotion. Audit your thoughts. Decide on the outcome. Control the sabotage and choose the response strategy. Fantastic. All right, any other questions? My apologies, people are asking me, someone's asked me to speak softly and slowly. Yeah, I will do my best. I've got so much passion I'm trying to get out, but thank you. I will make sure that I do my best for that. Any other questions right now? All right, so as I'm giving you a chance to type those in, if we ever want to make a long-term change, we need to rewire our brain. We need to replace what's going on in there right now, because we've got a pattern that we've all built up. You know, this is why neuroscience is such an important topic. And so what we need to do is we need to recognize the thoughts that we're having, the behaviors that we're operating in that aren't serving us. We might think they are, but they're not. And sometimes we need a coach to help us to do that. However, if we can recognize, then we've got to reject them and go, no, I don't want to do that anymore. So I had to reject the behavior that was leading to my burnout. I had to change what it is that I was doing. So I had to not just recognize it, I had to reject it. Then, and only then, we can replace it with a new strategy. And then, just like we have to build up what we've got going on there right now, we repeat the process over and over again. So this strategy that I've just taught you, it won't happen like that, because you're already running a strategy. You're already running an internal process of how you manage your behavior, manage your emotions. So repeating the new strategy, telling your mini me, your small voice to be quiet, and teaching it new things, and repeating that over and over, you will rewire your brain, and you'll be able to go from the way that you are navigating emotions now to a more healthy and harmonious way moving into the future. So let me just check in again. Great. So, there's heaps now. Can you give me an example? I'm not sure what the example was of, so you might want to, Manuel, if you can type that in. Love it. Reminds me of Tolle's different levels of consciousness. Thanks so much for sharing. Great tips. Sabotage is such an easy tool to employ to excuse fear-driven inaction. Yeah. Hey, we believe that the sabotage is a good strategy because it's keeping us in the mindset, in the box, you know, in the limitation, the cap that we put on ourselves. And we don't want to go outside that because that's scary. And that's going to create what we have told ourselves it's going to create. Love that. What's your advice to a person who cries at the slightest provocation? Can she apply these 5 strategies? So that person's not here. I'm not coaching them, or I could be. However, the first thing is to recognize that crying is a good thing. You know, I cry. My kids laugh at me. I cry if someone wins 50,000 on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, because I can feel the emotion for them with that. So for me, it's being able to go through. So rather take our eyes off the crying. That's the behavior. What we need to do is come back, just as I've taught you, and go to the root cause of the feeling and the thoughts that lead to that crying. Please possible share us an example of how to apply the steps. Hey, I'm limited in the time right now. However, the asking those questions is how you do it. Right? What is the emotion I'm feeling? What am I thinking? What do I want to happen? What could I do to make that happen? Or what could I do to sabotage that, if that's where you're operating? And then what do I do next? What's my strategy? Reminds me of CBT. Yes, very much so. Is it like an emotional diary? Yes, we teach people to do that. Sabotage can be sneaky sometimes. Yes, yeah, particularly if we keep hold of it. Fantastic. All right, I'm just mindful more here. Definitely it can. Fantastic. All right. Well, hey, that's my bit, and I'll be going through some, some more stuff with you as we go. What I wanted to ask you the question right now is, where do you go next? What's your next step? Is emotional intelligence something that you could do some work on developing? And I'm going to do my best to put some resources and things in the recording area so that I can help and serve as much as I can. But as I told you all up front, in the invitation to this, this is not one of those things where we're going to sell you anything, right? I just want to serve you, right? However, if you've got questions, there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to get back in connection with me and to ask those things, and we'll give you the resources that we can. But what's the next step for you? Okay, well, I got through all of that without my water. I need to have a little bit of water right now. And we are right on time. So there's no more questions, and I appreciate that. Questions will come through the day, and if your question didn't get answered, we will definitely go back and we will look at that, and you can interact with us and from here. But what I want to do right now is we're going to go and we're going to have a little bit of a break, because we all need a comfort stop. We all need a stretch. All right, so everyone right now, just put your hands above your head, just a little bit of a stretch. Oh, that's good. And shake yourself around a little bit. And we're just going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to get you back, and then we're going to get ready for an amazing speaker. I am so excited to be able to share this next speaker with you. She is the reason that I do what I do today. She is phenomenal. She's an amazing communicator. We are so blessed to be here. So make sure you hang around, make sure that you do this, 5-minute break, go and get a drink, go to the bathroom, stretch, do whatever, and then get back in front of your computer or whatever it is that you're watching this on, and we will have our next speaker. I love you all. Looking forward to investing the next 2 days with you. Well, welcome back. And it's great to see that people are staying, which is fantastic. So the stream will just keep going, leave it going while you're going to the bathroom, whatever you're doing. So let's just get ourselves ready right now. Now, what I want you to do right now is I want you to get rid of every distraction, everything that beeps, buzzes, gets your attention, whether it's a child or a phone or whatever. Politely remove it from your space, because you are in for a treat right now. So let's all close our eyes. Close your eyes and just relax. Get yourself in a calm position. Put your shoulders back, your head up. If you're sitting down, it might be great to stand up, but you do whatever is comfortable for you. Close your eyes. And what I want you to do, we're going to take in 3 deep breaths. And as we take in the deep breath, we're going to lift ourselves up. And as we breathe it out, we're going to breathe out everything that would distract us from getting the most out of this next session. And then on the 3rd breath, as we breathe it out, we're going to open our eyes and we're going to set a full intention to be totally present, ready to receive from one of the world's best. So let's go. First one, deep breath in and out. In and out. One more. In and out. Open your eyes, come back into the room and get ready. Dr. Laura Belson. She's an internationally known expert in the field of social and emotional intelligence. She's the founder of the Institute for Social and Emotional Intelligence in Denver, Colorado. And she's the author of the widely acclaimed Social and Emotional Intelligence Profile and Toolkit. Laura's studied extensively with international EI experts, and she's certified in 4 other leading emotional intelligence instruments. She's been on the faculty of the University of Denver for over 20 years, where she teaches graduate courses in leadership and communication, including a graduate course in coaching emotional intelligence. Laura has been an executive coach in private practice for well over 15 years. She's a master certified coach for the International Coach Federation, and she earned her Ph.D. in leadership and organizational communication from the University of Denver in 1996. Laura will be speaking about the genesis of the most up-to-date research, approach and model of social and emotional intelligence, how it came to be, and a major factor contributing to the growth of the most successful people around the world. She will also offer a look ahead to the future of this exciting field. That's her bio. Let me just tell you about this lady. When I started my journey in this thing called emotional intelligence, as I've already told you, I looked for someone who could take me and could give me what I needed in a way that wasn't tied up with all the noise and the hype and everything, who had the same values and ethics, who was really passionate about what they did and wanted to leave a legacy and go beyond themselves and help people all around the world. And this lady, Laura Belson, who I'm so blessed to call a friend, to call my mentor, the reason why I'm involved and the reason why I'm doing this summit right now. And without any further ado, I want to give you the opportunity to learn and experience this lady right now. Come on in, Dr. Laura.
Thank you very much, Grant. What a wonderful introduction. I sure appreciate that very much. Let me just double check. Can you hear okay? And can you see?
You are coming through fantastically. Yes.
Okay, very good. I'm also going to share my screen. Oops, says host disabled, participant screen sharing.
I'll just fix that.
No, thank you.
Let me just work out how to do that. All participants. There we go. You should be able to do it now.
All right. Very good. Okay. All right. It should be sharing now. And I'm going to go ahead and start it. So Grant already told you all this wonderful stuff. I am the founder of the Institute for Social and Emotional Intelligence and the author of the Social and Emotional Intelligence Profile and Toolkit. I also have my own coaching business, which I've had for about 24 years. And I've been on the faculty at the university for a long time, University of Denver. I love what I get to do. And I love working with people like Grant. And we've had the opportunity to work with the leading coaches around the world, over 1,000 coaches now, who are bringing this out to hundreds of thousands of lives. So let's talk a little, I'm going to be speaking on a little bit about the rich history of social and emotional intelligence, the evolution of the model, and also a little about the future. So let's go ahead and take a look. I like this picture because if you take a look at the writing on this phone screen, it's not English, which goes to the point that social and emotional intelligence and emotions are universal in every culture, every country, every language. Emotions exist. Emotions are central to the human experience. It makes us human. Emotions come to us unbidden. They are simply a fact. They are information that comes into our lives. So it's universal. So what we did at the Institute was we took a look at the leading instruments and models of social and emotional intelligence. And this was 20-some years ago. The Emotional and Social Competency Inventory, which was based on the work of Daniel Goleman and is now published by the Hay Group. The EQI 2.0, based on the work of Reuven Bar-On and published by Multi Health Systems. The Mesquite, also published by Multi Health Systems, Meyer, Solovay, and Caruso. The Meyer, Solovay, and Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test. The EQ Map, based on the work of Robert Cooper and Esther Orioli, published by SE Systems. And this is a very busy slide, but what we did was we took a look at all of the leading instruments that were available at the time. The ESCI, the EQI 2.0, now 2.0, the Mesquite, the EQ Map, and we took a look at what did they measure? What did these instruments measure? And what was the model of social and emotional intelligence? And as you can see, there are similarities. All of them measure emotional self-awareness. Emotional self-awareness is what's coming up for us in this very moment. They typically measured something called personal power, but some of them called it something else like self-confidence or assertiveness or positive self-regard. We kind of like the term personal power. Behavioral self-control was another common thing. Others called it emotional self-control or impulse control. We like the term behavioral self-control. Emotional self-control suggests that we can control our emotions to the point of repressing or stuffing them. And we don't want that. As I mentioned, emotions come to us unbidden. It's just part of being human. And we want that information. It's a valuable source of information. So what we did, and this, we're not going to get into all of this, but you'll see that there are some gaps in some of the assessments. And what we did was we filled those gaps, and then we created a toolkit to help people learn to put these principles into practice. And what we came up with out of all of this research and all of this integration of all of this information is a 4-quadrant model. Self is at the top left, other at the top right, awareness and management. And this really kind of defines what social and emotional intelligence is. It's about self-awareness. What's coming up for me in the moment? What on the other awareness? What might be coming up for another person that we're interacting with? What can I do to manage myself? And I know that Grant was just speaking about that. What should I do with this information? And it's a very valuable source of information if we pay attention to it, to what's coming up for us and what's coming up for other people. Then we can manage ourselves and manage our relationships. So self-awareness is really foundational. It leads to we can't be aware of what might be coming up for other people if we're not aware of what's coming up for us. We also can't manage ourselves if we're not aware of what's coming up for us. And with all of these, it leads to relationship management, which leads to thriving, flourishing, and greater well-being. I know that a big part of this leadership summit has to do with positive psychology. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that and how these two fields support each other and mesh. So, backing up a long way, our concept of intelligence has evolved over the past 120 years or so. Prior to the 1900, we really hadn't scientifically defined what intelligence is. But in 1900, a French psychologist, Albert Bonnet, created the very first IQ test and administered it to French school children in 1900. And the way that he defined intelligence was primarily verbal and mathematical skills. And that was our definition of intelligence until about the mid-1980s, when a gentleman came along named Howard Gardner. He was a psychology professor at Harvard University. And he said, you know what, folks? There's a whole lot more to intelligence than simply verbal and mathematical skills. Hello, what a concept. That in turn led to the Meyer and Solovey coining the term emotional intelligence in 1990, and later Roux and Baron, just very shortly thereafter, coined the term emotional quotient, or EQ. And then in the mid-2000s, the term social and emotional intelligence really came into play. So let's just touch on, just for a second, just for context, in terms of the history of all of this, to see how this all came about. Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. He said there's a lot more to it. You can see at the very top of this model, linguistic or verbal intelligence. And then going clockwise, you see logical or mathematical. And that's what really defined intelligence until Howard Gardner came along. But he said there's a lot more to it. There's spatial intelligence, musical, kinesthetic. Let's just take a quick look at some of these. Some of you may have had the good fortune to travel to Florence, Italy, and see the David. This is like spatial intelligence personified. Michelangelo took 2 years to carve this David. It stands about 17 feet high on a pedestal that's about 5 feet high. I mean, Michelangelo took this big, huge block of marble, and somehow he was able to see in his mind and carve away and chip away and reveal the David. The curls of the hair, the eyebrows, the eyes, the hands, the veins in the hands, the earlobes, again, the veins, the musculature. I mean, what an amazing form of intelligence that allows us to see something before it's even built. Builders have this, architects have this, artists have this form of intelligence. Musical intelligence. Beethoven wrote the Ninth Symphony when he was deaf. He could no longer hear the music, but he had a mind and an intelligence that knew how to put the notes together. Musical intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence. This is a mind-body connection form of intelligence. And I mean, Olympic athletes who win the downhill by 1/100th of a second. There is a mind-body connection there, intelligence there. But moving around the circle, you see intrapersonal intelligence and interpersonal intelligence. And these are the two forms of intelligence that gave rise to social and emotional intelligence. Intra-personal, meaning knowing myself, what's coming up for me, and interpersonal, knowing what might be coming up for someone else and managing my relationships. Later on, naturalistic intelligence was added. That's a form of intelligence that some people have who can distinguish between species of trees and animals and even rocks and geology. Existentialistic intelligence is a form of intelligence that some people have who really take a look at why are we here? The bigger questions of life. We're going to be focusing on interpersonal and intrapersonal as a means and a path to thriving, flourishing, and greater well-being, which is at its heart, positive psychology. So again, self and other, awareness and management, being aware of what's coming up for us in the moment, being aware of what might be coming up for someone else, using that information to manage ourselves and manage our relationships, leading to thriving, flourishing, and greater well-being. So that's a bit of a history of how we got to this point of social and emotional intelligence. Let's take a quick look at the future. The future of social and emotional intelligence, I believe, is its integration with the field of positive psychology. And I'm so excited that you all are going to be really focusing in on positive psychology as you go forward over the next few days. So what is positive psychology? Well, it's the scientific study of what's right with people. What a concept. Traditional psychology, and there's certainly nothing wrong with traditional psychology, but psychology, positive psychology, is rather than taking a look at mental illness and pathology, it's the scientific study of what goes right with people, of people who are thriving and flourishing, so that we can teach that. What makes people thrive and flourish? How can we optimize human functioning and well-being? And how can we help people become more resilient, optimistic, empathetic, and connected to others? This is a version of positive psychology, one of the leading models that came from Martin Seligman. Martin Seligman is a professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, and he has been studying, along with several others, quite a few others now, what makes people thrive and flourish. And he came up with this acronym, PERMA. He didn't come up with V, that's a little controversial, but some people have added that in. But let me just mention what this is, and you're going to be having the opportunity to get into this in much greater detail over the next couple of days. But the P in PERMA stands for positive emotions. It's about being positive. It's about choosing positivity. It is a choice, which is also a self-regulation and a behavioral self-management thing. We can choose to focus on what's wrong. We can choose to ruminate, which is what psychologists call it, when we focus on the negative and we spiral downward into almost clinical depression sometimes. Or we can choose to focus on what's right, what's working. I sometimes tell people about my 106-year-old grandmother. She was born before World War I. She lived through World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II, and so much. I mean, seeing a man on the moon and computers and so much more. We are in the midst of a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, and it's a very serious thing. And yet, we still have things we can be grateful for. My grandmother could not stomach the smell of turnips. She did not know, she would talk about it, she did not know how her mother kept her alive, her and her brothers, during World War I. And I think it was the turnips. That's all they had to eat. I mean, we are fortunate, even with our masks, we can go to grocery stores, and there's a whole acres practically of fresh produce and from all over the world. And we are not going hungry. So we can choose to focus on the negative, or we can choose to focus on the positive. It is a choice, a self-regulation, self-management type of choice. Now, that's not to say that we should ignore negative emotions. In fact, far from it. As I mentioned, emotions come to us unbidden, and there's usually a reason. We need to stop and listen for that. So if we're upset, or we're angry, or we're frustrated, we need to pay attention to that. It's just that we don't want to ruminate and go down into a downward spiral. We want to pay attention, make some decisions about what we're going to do about that, and then move forward, preferably with positive emotions. By the way, some of the research from Sonia Lubomirsky suggests that about 40%, almost a full half, of our emotional state is a choice. It's what we choose to be. E stands for engagement in this model. Engagement is about like flow. It's when we're so focused on what we're doing and so engaged in what we're doing, time flies. We are engaged in life. We can be engaged in work. And again, it can be a choice, and we can design our lives around what engages us. R stands for relationships. Relationships, this is probably the number one, not probably, it is the number one factor in positive psychology. In people who are thriving and flourishing, they have sound relationships. They are deeply connected to other people. Some of the research suggests that people who who don't exercise, who are overweight, they're 20% more likely to have a shorter lifespan. People who smoke are 50%. People who are heavy drinkers, it's 30%. People who smoke, it's 50%. People who don't have other people in their lives, people who are lonely, a full 70% more likely to die a premature death. Some of you may know the story of Rosito. Rosito is a little town in Pennsylvania, eastern Pennsylvania, here in the United States. And it was a town in the 1960s. There was a population of about 2,000 people. And they had almost zero incidence of heart disease and stroke. No heart attacks. And yet the people, most of the people living there were of Italian-American descent. It was a very close-knit community. They'd get together on Wednesday nights for spaghetti dinner, Thursday nights for bocce ball, Friday nights for fish, Saturdays, pig roast. And, I mean, they were always together with other people. They studied them. It wasn't their diet or exercise. In fact, they ate too much, they drank too much, they smoked, but they outlived the general population in the United States. And the researchers found that it was because of their close connections, their relationships, the close-knit community. M stands for meaning, being connected to something bigger than ourselves. These are the factors that make people thrive and flourish. Meaning. Meaning can come from a variety of places. It can come from our work. It can come from raising a family, having a garden plot, doing volunteer work, all kinds of things. And when we look for it, we can find it. Here, I live in Colorado, and we have high mountain passes that are, 2-lane roads that get snowed in the winter. And the only time that they can really work on these roads, do repaving and fix potholes and that kind of thing, is in the summertime. When that's, of course, when everybody wants to be up there, because that's when the roads are open. So they have because it's a 2-lane road, they have to shut down one lane the one they're working on, and they have to let 2 lanes go on a single lane. So they have a flag person who stops people, and the other side gets to go. So you get the picture. This guy comes up, and he drives up, and he gets stopped. Of course he gets stopped. So he's at the front of the line. He's got his arm out the window, and he's just tearing into the flag person. Why'd you stop me? What a horrible job. How can you stand it? How can you stand this? It's got to be the most boring job on the planet. I don't know how you can possibly do it. And the guy looks at him and he says, you know, I actually kind of like my job. I said, you know, I look around. This is beautiful up here. This is God's country. You know, look at these mountains. Look at this blue sky. Look at these wildflowers. It's beautiful here. He said, and you see those guys over there? Those guys are my buddies. I am making sure that they're safe. His job had meaning for him. We can always find that. A stands for achievement or accomplishment. People who are thriving and flourishing have all of these characteristics, or in some measure, and they also have this sense of accomplishing something, achieving something, which again goes back to self-management, setting goals and achieving them. V stands for vitality. This is not part of Marty Seligman's original theory, but it is has been added on by some people, that if we have our health, we can thrive and flourish. The reason Marty Seligman doesn't necessarily buy that is because he knows people who have been in horrible accidents and who are now in a wheelchair, who still are thriving and flourishing. So he's not totally sold on this. In any case, I think the future of social and emotional intelligence is its integration with positive psychology and happiness and well-being. So I had to get this picture in. What creates well-being? This is something we seriously study these things. What creates well-being? What makes some people thrive and flourish? What makes life most worth living? How do human strengths and virtues come into play? How about human emotions? How do they factor into thriving and flourishing? And can all of this be taught? So going back to our 4-quadrant model, self and other, awareness and management, that self-awareness, what's coming up for me at this particular moment? What might be coming up for another person? And using that information to stop and think about it, to then manage ourselves. And it's a very valuable source of information if we pay attention to it, to then manage ourselves and manage our relationships. Because it can lead to thriving, flourishing, and greater well-being in our lives. So let's take a quick look at these 4 quadrants, just a real quick look. Grant mentioned a few minutes ago the 26 distinct competencies. We don't have time to go into all of them, but I do want to touch on the most important ones in each of these quadrants. So it starts with emotional self-awareness. And Grant was talking a little bit about this. This is about being aware of our emotions in the moment as they arrive. And one of the ways to really understand our emotions is to have a strong emotional vocabulary. And Grant has a wonderful couple of tools actually on this. One of them is a 2-page document, single-spaced, 4 columns list of emotions. It's the most comprehensive list of emotions we've been able to come up with. This is part of it. So for example, paying attention, am I feeling over here anxious or apprehensive? There's a difference, and it will inform us. Are we, for example, feeling enthusiastic or exhilarated? Once again, there's a difference. So it's about being aware of our emotions, and a good, healthy vocabulary helps us get in touch with our emotions. And I'm sure Grant would be willing to share that 2-page document with anybody who's interested if you get in touch with him. I'm offering that on your behalf, Grant. So self-awareness starts with emotional self-awareness, accurately assessing what's coming up for us. And then personal power has to do with an inner knowledge, an inner knowing that we can handle what life is throwing at us, that positive self-regard, that self-confidence, inner self, that taming of the saboteur or the imposter, the self-critic. So that's self-awareness. Other awareness. Empathy begins with empathy. This gentleman named Aaron Fauerstein he was the CEO of a company that manufactured micro down, fluffy, like a synthetic down. He had a plant. It was an operation in Western Massachusetts here in the United States, very rural area. The building itself was an old mill. It was a large wooden structure. It was built in the 1800s, and in this old wooden structure, they were manufacturing this light, fluffy down, like synthetic down that you put in down jackets or down blankets, that kind of thing. And one cold December night, the building caught on fire. And as you might imagine, with it being this old wooden building full of light, fluffy down-like stuff, the thing just went up in a huge fireball. It was a very small rural community. There were probably maybe 5,000 people living in the area. About 2,000, 2,500 worked for him. He was the major employer. The volunteer fire department came out. All anybody could do was stand back in the parking lot and watch their livelihood literally go up in flames. He stood there shoulder to shoulder with his employees and with the townspeople, and he felt empathy, this other awareness. He understood the situation. He understood very clearly that they relied on their paycheck from his business to feed and clothe and house their families. He understood the situation. Situational or organizational awareness is kind of like empathy on steroids, like one to many. They understand this town, this community will shut down if we don't rebuild. And he decided in that moment to be of service and this is part of other awareness. If we have empathy and we understand the situation, we can be of service to other people. And he got an award for Best Corporate Citizen because what he did was he looked around at all these people and he said, we will rebuild. And not only did they rebuild, he kept everyone on the payroll for the 2 or 3 months that it took. They didn't put up a nice, beautiful wooden structure. They put up a, steel metal building, but it did what it needed to do. And they were back in business. He could have taken his insurance money and hightailed it to someplace nice and warm on that cold December night and retired, but he decided to stick around and be of service. Self-management has to do with behavioral self-control. Some of you are probably familiar with the Marshmallow Studies. I love these studies. These started at Stanford in the I think it was the 1960s, 1968 or something. They brought these little 4-year-old kids into the psychology lab, and they got them settled at these little child-size, chairs and tables. And the researcher in a white coat glanced at his or her watch and said, I have to run an errand. Would you wait for me? I'll be back in about 15 minutes. Here's a marshmallow. If you can wait, you can have this now, or if you can wait till I get back, I'll give you 2. And these little kids are so cute. They'll squeeze the marshmallow. They'll sniff the marshmallow. They'll close their eyes so they don't have to look at the marshmallow. They even get under the table. And what the researchers were actually after, they didn't have an errand to run. They were watching and filming the kids. They were studying behavioral self-control. These kids wanted that marshmallow. And they did this, they replicated this many, many times. And they studied these kids over the next 40 years or so, or longer. They found that those kids who could wait until the researcher got back so that they could have 2 marshmallows, those kids with better behavioral self-control did far better in work and in life. They did far better on their college entrance exams, far better in their grades in school, far better in their relationships and marriages, far better in the workplace. Behavioral self-control, self-management really counts for a lot. These are a bunch of the other competencies under self-management. Integrity is one of them. We often get a feeling in the pit of our stomach about what's right and what's wrong, and we can choose to act on it or not. Self-management is a choice. Some of you are familiar with Viktor Frankl's quote about between stimulus and response, there is a pause, there is a gap. And in that gap, we have the opportunity to choose our response. So rather than simply react, we can choose a response. And we can choose to act in accordance with our sense of integrity or not. We can choose to innovate or be creative. People will say, I don't have a creative bone in my body. And actually, the research says quite the opposite. It's a choice. It's a choice of getting into action and taking initiative or procrastinating, to strive and achieve, to be optimistic, to be resilient, to manage our stress. Personal agility is how we deal with change that's thrust at us. Being intentional. These are all part of the self-management competencies in the self-management quadrant. And finally, relationship management. It all points here. And that starts with communication. And you may remember from the PERMA model that in PERMA, the R stands for relationships. And it was the number one factor that contributed to longevity, to happiness, to resilience, to lower heart disease, lower incidence of stroke. And so this relationship management really integrates very well with positive psychology. These are all of the different competencies that we measure in relationship management, interpersonal effectiveness, our ability to influence. And even if we're not in sales, we still influence every day in business meetings. We're trying to sell somebody on our good ideas. How we manage conflict. Conflict is inevitable. Whenever you get more than one human being in a room at a time, sooner or later there will be conflict. It's how it's managed that makes all the difference, whether it's managed positively or negatively. Our ability to lead, inspire people, to move in a new direction, to bring about change, our ability to build bonds and that deep human connection, to work in teams, to coach others and mentor others and build trust. These are all the competencies associated with relationship management. So, going back to effective social and emotional functioning leads to all of these wonderful things. And this is where they integrate these two fields. And this is the future of social and emotional intelligence, is where is it going as it relates to positive psychology? It leads to an enhanced ability to understand other people, leading to better, stronger relationships and a deeper connection with other people. It leads to an enhanced understanding of our own emotions, which leads to greater self-regard and self-acceptance. It leads to enhanced self-regulation, which leads to greater resilience, positivity, optimism, greater success in the workplace and in life. It leads us to a greater sense of well-being and positivity and a sense of thriving and flourishing. It actually, I would also argue, leads to longer life, longevity, better health. It boosts our immunity. I'll tell you one quick story, since we do have a few seconds, few extra minutes here, about one study where they brought 299 undergraduate students into the psychology lab. And the students did not know what they were being. They gave the students a test. It's always these poor undergraduates who get the brunt of these studies. They gave these students a test. They didn't know what they were being tested on. Turns out they were being tested on how positive or negative are you feeling at this very particular moment. And then one by one, they took the students into the next room and administered the rhinovirus to them. I mean, they shot the cold virus directly up their noses. I don't know how they managed to get this study through the University Ethics Committee, but they did, and has been replicated. But what the researchers were after is there, which the students didn't know, they shot the cold virus directly up their noses, sent them home and said, come back in 7 days. What the researchers were after is there a correlation between how positive or negative a student felt and whether or not they came down with the common cold? And sure enough, there is a very strong correlation, statistically significant. Those individuals who were feeling more positive came down with the common cold far less frequently than those who were feeling negative. It seems to influence the emotions of positivity and negativity influences a whole cascade of hormonal responses and chemical responses in the body that influence our immune systems. People who are happier live longer. They get fewer colds and illnesses. They have less incidence of heart disease and stroke, as we saw in the Rosito effect study. So, it's in social and emotional intelligence are an integral part of positive psychology. It significantly impacts our happiness and positivity, our engagements in work and in life, our relationships, our well-being, our quest for meaning in life. It influences character development, which is also a big aspect of positive psychology, by the way. And it influences human performance and accomplishment, and even influences our vitality. So that's what I have, Grant. I cannot see the questions. So if you could give me some questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Fantastic, Laura. So, hey, everyone, let's just give Laura a big round of applause before we get into questions. That was just simply brilliant. So, and I'm sure people can now see why I studied under you and have the regard, or hold you in the regard that I do. So, just as we are waiting for some questions to be typed in, I'm just checking here and multi-switching. So, Laura, can you just stop sharing your screen now?
Sure.
So that we can see you rather than those question marks? Okay, so I've been answering some questions as we go along. So one of the ones that was really fantastic, and you can continue to talk to this, is someone asking, I think it was Praise, was asking, she goes, so it all starts with self-awareness. And, some other questions that were coming through there was the same thing. Someone was saying, wow, relationship management has a lot of competencies. And, for me, I've found that when people get that wrong and they want to...
Grant, you're on mute. There you go.
Oh, am I still back? Am I back? Yeah,
you're
fantastic. Back. Well, hey, I don't know what happened there because I just dropped my earphone and it muted me. Anyway, that's weird. So the questions were coming through, and Praise was saying, so it starts with self-awareness, and others were talking about relationship management competencies being so many of them. And what's your experience? Because I know that for me, a lot of people miss that, and that's nailed it there. Self-awareness is where it starts. I know a lot of companies and individuals that want to work, let's come in and do these relationship management competencies without building that platform. So can you speak to that in your experience? Why is it so important, even though it's obvious, why is it so important to start with self-awareness?
I love the observation, and I'm glad the individual is pointing that out and picked up on that and everything else. It's foundational. Self-awareness is foundational. We have to be aware of what's coming up for us if we're ever going to be able to be aware of what might be coming up for another person. We have to be able to experience it so that we might know what another person is experiencing. We also have to be aware, self-aware, in order to be able to manage ourselves and manage our response. Wow, I'm getting frustrated. Wow, I'm feeling pretty angry right now. Or wow, I'm really enjoying this. so that we can then manage and design and intentionally design our lives to live in a better, more positive place. I love that you pointed out that a lot of organizations will start with a lot of the team building and conflict management and powerful influencing skills and building trust and communication skills training and that kind of thing. And that's all good. It is all good. But I've also been in situations where a lot of these individuals who run organizations, they don't necessarily understand that it begins with emotional self-awareness. They have said to me, emotions, they've said, I was wondering after I made a presentation, I was wondering how you were even going to get emotional and intelligence in the same sentence. Another has said to me, more than one said, emotions, there's no room for emotions in the workplace. We park emotions at the door. And they don't realize just how powerful, how important it is to be aware of what's coming up for us in the moment. A lot of stuff going on in the world right now with Black Lives Matter here in the United States. People are fed up. People are upset. And they're paying attention to that. And others are becoming more aware. And we're now talking about more managing ourselves so that we can, we're going to change civil society at long last here in the United States. Because we're starting to pay attention to these things. In a relationship with another person, if you feel constantly put down and you're upset, it's important to pay attention to that. In the workplace, it's important to pay attention to that so that you can exercise that personal power, so that you can become more assertive. So those are just some random thoughts around. But I love that the individual you mentioned really called out that self-awareness is foundational. It truly is.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. Got another great question here from Gorka. How can we apply positive psychology against ego? Now, I know we haven't got the full context of the question, but I'll leave that one for you to answer.
Well, I think there's a whole lot more to the context of that question. If Gorka, cares to
look, that may be a challenge. That may be a challenge with the size of the chat roll. So let's just assume what it is that we think that she's asking or he's asking. So what I'm thinking that they're saying there is, how can we apply positive psychology? Indeed, emotional intelligence is probably a better thing to look at when someone has an unhealthy ego. So how would you answer that?
Well, okay, so what I'm suspecting, and I don't know fully, what the context of the question is, but, I think we can also take a look at people who are narcissists, people who have an overinflated sense of ego. And those are actually individuals, and I'm not a psychologist, and I don't want, and this should be not construed, please don't construe this as any kind of psychological advice, but these are often individuals who do have imposter syndrome, who don't have a healthy self-regard, and who are out there to prove themselves and are not managing themselves very well, because they're not really terribly self-aware. And so that leads to very poor relationships, a poor understanding of what their impact is on other people, and poor relationships, and will end up resulting in them probably languishing. There's a kind of a continuum of positive psychology. If you consider like -10, 0, and +10, a -10 is significant mental illness. And there is a place for traditional psychology in dealing with mental illness. 0 on this continuum means there's no mental illness, but that person is also not thriving and flourishing. And so an overinflated ego might result in somebody just kind of being at that 0, languishing, what they call languishing. Whereas if they could get in touch with themselves, if they had a more healthy self-awareness and other awareness, and had the ability to manage themselves, they could manage their relationships so much better. And again, relationships being the number one factor in thriving and flourishing. So I hope that helps answer. You bet.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you've got people saying excellent presentation, Laura, and thank you. So you're changing lives as usual. There's another question here, just feeding through to see. Some of them are questions, some of them are statements. How do we practice, or in fact, just to give you a little bit on what you were just saying there, I always say to people in trainings and in organizations, I'll always get these questions of going, okay, so, you know, and then what they're really saying to me is, well, you don't work where I work, Grant. So how am I supposed to apply this emotional intelligence, positive psychology stuff that you're learning when I work with this person? Right? So for me, another thing to add to what you were just saying there, Laura, that I find helps people to understand is, you know, we can only influence, obviously, other people. We're not there to change them. So even if they don't take the bait at all, they don't have any idea or any inkling of wanting to get involved in what it is that we're learning and have learnt, what I've found is me being more positive and exercising positive psychology, me being able to have a higher level of personal power and behavioural self-control and all the things that we work on with social emotional intelligence. Here's the key. It lets me navigate that person a lot more effectively. It enables me to have less effect on me and who I am and those people around me. So getting this for yourself is the greatest gift. It doesn't mean you're going to change the world, doesn't mean you're going to change others. You're still, but however, the other thing is you're going to make better decisions about what you let people say and do around you, and, you know, to build that up. So, hey, that's just a little bit to add to that. And there's another question here around how do you practice empathy while experiencing deep negative emotions? So, you know, and that one's obviously around being able to understand the emotions first at a more finite and succinct level, and then manage our thinking around that. So I'm going to paraphrase what I think you're saying there, and that is, how am I supposed to be empathetic towards someone when I'm experiencing negative emotions about them and towards them? Well, hey, just as Laura said, you know, we've got to realize that everyone is going through their own things. So having empathy for them may even uncover a side of them that you haven't seen yet because they've never had that before. And being able to take those thoughts captive that you're having about them so that you can logically do what you need to do to show empathy. Would you agree with that, or what could you add to that, Laura, just as we finish?
I do agree with that. I also think it's really important to maybe back up from needing to feel empathy into taking a look at what's going on in your life that you're feeling negativity, and get a handle on that. It's okay to feel negative emotions. We don't want what's called sometimes toxic happiness, which is somebody who's like happy, happy, happy all the time. That's not the point of positive psychology. Emotions are inherently human, and there are going to be positive and negative. When I taught, I was teaching graduate courses, graduate seminars in leadership and communication. And I came up with this phrase, what I came to realize, because I was teaching adults, adult learners, that I realized there's pain in every room. In every classroom, I would find that people were dealing with different kinds of pain. I mean, some of them had been diagnosed with a serious illness, or their spouse had been, or they were dealing with a troubled teen, or financial problems, or an aging parent, or they were laid off, or work problems. I mean, there's pain in every room. We need to work with people to help them understand that pain, and we need to practice then empathy. We need to deal with our own stuff, and then we can experience empathy for someone else, if that helps.
Wow, that's amazing.
The point of the whole thing, the point of the whole thing in terms of pain in every room is it's really important to stop and be kind and be empathetic. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, hey, I'm just saying that's a great way to finish. The world needs a lot more empathy right now.
It sure
I
does.
always tell people, because there was a number of things in the chat about, bullies and those sort of things. I always tell people I'm here to serve the bullied and the bully. Because a bully doesn't get out of bed in the morning unless there are some people with clinical challenges. They don't get out of the bed in the morning and go, oh, great, I get to go and make everyone's life a misery today. It's more, as Laura was saying, it's more an outworking of how they feel about themselves. So when we show more empathy around the world, I'm not going to get into anything particular. Social media is a big one, though. When we show more empathy to people, it disarms that negative in them, in my experience. And one of the things I love to do, because empathy is one of the big ones that I work with all the time, is, just getting an understanding of it's not, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. I'm not feeling sorry for you. I'm walking in your shoes. I'm trying to
Yes.
understand what it is that you're going through. And when we pause and we think of it that way, we're going to type different things in the keyboard. We're going to respond in a different way. So I think that's absolutely brilliant. So there's heaps of people saying thank you. There's other questions there that I will get back and answer. However, Laura, can I once again just say thank you so much for being who you are?
You're very welcome.
Knowing you over the last number of years and having you on my journey, I wouldn't be where I am and wouldn't be working where I'm working and doing the things that I'm doing and stepping into my own, self of what I'm actually created to do unless you came into my life. And I really want to thank you. You're a pioneer in this industry. You still have so much that you can give. You've got the Ph.D. side, so you know what you're talking about, and you've got the practical experience, and I think that is amazing. So thank you very much. Let's just give Laura a big high five, virtual high five. She can see you, she can feel it in her heart, and we're going to take a break again right now. And so thank you, Laura. And we're going to come back, and we've got another amazing speaker, another great lady in my life who has helped me along my journey, Dr. Suzanne Knowles. So let's go to a break. Let's do a bit of a stretch. Let's go to the bathroom. Leave the stream running because you're only going to be away for a few minutes. Come on back and we're going to continue. So let's give Laura another round of applause, and I shall see you again shortly. Okay, well, welcome back. And we had a little bit of a user error on my part there. So welcome back. Can you just type in the chat box and let me know that you're back? That would be great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There's so many claps and hands and thank yous and fist pumps and everything. So I really, really appreciate that. So we're going to get started again right now. And I'm going to introduce you to the next amazing speaker. So Dr. Suzanne Knowles, she's the chair, she's the founder of the Australian Institute of Professional Coaches. She's a psychologist, educator, executive coach and author. She holds a master's degree in education, psychology and business administration. And she's recently completed a Ph.D. researching how organizations develop a coaching culture. Suzanne previously held senior executive positions in large government and private sector organizations, and in a consulting capacity, provided executive coaching services to senior executives and board members. She's held board positions in government, not-for-profit, and professional service firms. As a psychologist, Suzanne has experience in providing counselling and therapeutic interventions across a range of personal and family issues. Her first book, which I have, is called Positive Psychology Coaching. It's available on Amazon.com. You need to get a copy of it. And she's writing a second book right now, and it'll be ready soon. It's called Transforming Organizational Culture Through Coaching. So that's her bio. But once again, this is an amazing lady that has come into my life, and she is someone who fits my values and ethics. She is a passionate person about the topics that we're talking about. She's in it to help others. She works tirelessly. You know, she's done like the work she's done to get her PhD, whilst everything else that she's doing is just phenomenal. And I'm going to allow her to share with you and bring her on now. You don't need to hear anything more from me. Please help me welcome Dr. Suzanne Knowles.
Thank you very much, Grant, for that kind introduction. Yes, I think I'm live now. Is that right? Can you hear me now, loud and clear? Okay.
Yep. Away you go.
And thank you, everybody, for joining in this presentation. I was bowled over by Laura's presentation on social emotional intelligence and its association with positive psychology. And as you will hear from me in my presentation, my focus of positive psychology is on coaching. And that's been developed as I've been doing my executive coaching and consulting, also academic lecturing. So basically what I would call myself is a pracademic. So what I've discovered and tried to uncover over the years is my passion is coaching, as you may understand from my book, etc. But what I wanted to do is delve into the evidence for coaching, because it's a relatively new field. It's an emerging field of practice and not yet a discipline in its own right. So that's where my research has been, trying to uncover the evidence for coaching from traditional psychology, which I'll go into a little bit further in a short while. But also then talk about positive psychology as it has evolved from that traditional psychology approaches, and also then look at the application of both of these traditional and positive psychology research and findings to coaching. Now, as I go through the presentation, there's going to be a fair bit of content, unfortunately, to give a background for the evidence for coaching. So I'm going to refer to some of my notes as I go through, and maybe you would like to take some notes as well. But also because of my practitioner experience, I hope to give you some key principles of positive psychology that you can apply to practice. And so that's the content of it. In terms of the context, I deal with coaching. You may not be a coach, and that's okay, because these principles of positive psychology can apply to anyone, anywhere, anytime. Basically, how we relate to each other in the environment, how we understand each other, support each other, motivate each other. And so any application I have to clients in coaching, please just refer that to yourself in your workplace, in your life, basically. The third thing I'd like you to listen for as we go through the presentation is the impact. So the impact of some of these approaches and principles that may impact on you and your life. And when you go out there to practice some of these techniques, such as mindfulness, for example, which is one of the key aspects of positive psychology, how are you then feeling about the impact, which comes back to social and emotional intelligence. And as Grant has said, state the emotion. So they're the three areas I'm going to look at: the traditional psychology, the positive psychology, the research and understandings for coaching, and finally the application in terms of principles of positive psychology to coaching practice. So let's start first of all by looking at what is psychology. And I shall go to the slides to take you through that. So what is psychology? Psychology is a study of human behaviour and the mental processes that allow us to learn, function and respond to various situations in our lives. And notice the word respond, okay? So Grant was talking earlier about reaction, and we're not talking about reaction, we're talking about how we can transform reaction into action and response.
Suzanne, can I just jump in? Sorry.
Yes.
You haven't shared your screen. You haven't shared your screen?
Okay. Let me go back. And thank you, Grant, for that prompting. I'm going to, no, that's not right. So I'll share. Share. Okay, have you got that now? There. How's that? Does that come up now, Grant?
Not yet. We're still just getting you. So
It
just make
says
sure you're sharing the screen that's got your... Yeah, but it's not sharing your slides. It is now.
It is now? Okay. You got the first one?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So there's the first slide. It's about human behaviour, mental processes that allow us to respond to various situations in our lives. So really it's concerned with how we gather information from the environment, how we make sense of it, given our experience and our background, and then how we act or react to that situation. So the goal of psychological research is basically to understand what motivates people, what makes them tick. The goal of positive psychological research is then how to find out ways to bring greater happiness into their lives. So the evidence for coaching is based on traditional psychological research, which looks at about 6 branches of psychology. And these include behavioural psychology, which I'll discuss shortly, cognitive psychology, developmental, humanistic, personality and social psychology, each of which I'll go through and explain in a little while their application to coaching. Let me also note that psychology is both an academic and an applied field of research. And when it's applied, it can be applied in, say, 4 basic clinical settings, such as clinical settings, like hospitals and mental and health institutions, educational settings, for example, in schools and universities where I lectured and worked as an educational psychologist, in counselling settings, such as family relations centres, where I worked with family dysfunction, domestic violence and abuse, and in organisational settings, where I worked as an executive coach and consultant, supporting executives in the execution of their roles and the resolution of their personal issues. And as Laura was mentioning, you know, everybody has personal issues, no matter what their role and where they're working. So when you're working as a coach, oftentimes it's about looking at the personal issues. For example, the teenager might have been expelled from school, or they might have aged parents that they're caring for, or there might be illness in the family. So you need to look behind the actual presenting issue and look beyond into the person and what's happening for the person at that level. So from a coaching perspective, all of these branches of psychology contribute to how coaches work to assist clients to develop a better life. So let me take you through each of those 6 branches of psychology that I mentioned and how they contribute to our understanding of coaching and working with individuals and helping them to have happier lives. First of all, behavioural psychology, as Laura mentioned, goes back 120 or 150 years. It was the first branch of psychology that at that stage scientists investigated to look at how people behave, because it's concerned with observable, visible behaviours. It's what you see. And a lot of times it's what you see is what you get. But as we know from behavioural research, what you see can be changed. Behaviour can be changed. So scientists such as Watson and his colleagues demonstrated how behaviour can be changed by conditioning new responses in relation to a specific stimulus, such as when they unfortunately evoked fear in a baby called the little Albert experiments, who was approached by a rabbit and later by a white rat, which they linked with a loud sound. And of course that frightened him and caused him to develop a phobia. So that's conditioning responses. Skinner showed how behaviour can be changed by reward and punishment, which is still used today in a lot of particularly corporate and also parental environments. So he developed what he called the Skinner box, in which a rat learned to push a lever to get food, and that was the reward. Thankfully, neither of those techniques are used in coaching today, but rather this research tells us that behaviour is not fixed and can be changed as a result of learning new information, trying out new behaviours, and reinforcing successful behaviours. And what you'll learn later on is about the neural pathways that develop as we develop patterns of behaviour that can be learned and unlearned, and behavioural loops that can be changed as well. So in contrast, the cognitive psychologists are concerned with the inner world, not the outer observable world, but the inner world, how people acquire, process, and store information. They study a person's inner states such as attention, perception, memory, motivation, problem solving, and decision making. And today, cognitive psychology addresses clients' mental models and mindsets that either support and encourage or can hinder and hold back the acquisition of desired goals by identifying clients' limiting beliefs and reframing negative thoughts into positive aspirations. The third area of traditional psychological research related to developmental psychology. And Laura mentioned people such as Binet, who developed the first intelligence test, Dewey, who worked in educational fields, and Piaget, who worked with children. So developmental psychologists are concerned with how people learn, grow, and develop, which is the aim of coaching. What we know from more recent research is that people who believe that their ability to change is fixed will behave in different ways from those who believe that they have some control over their ability to learn, change, and improve. And that's the basis of what we do when we coach people. We want them to change their behaviour because what they're doing at the moment is not working for them. And so to be more effective in life, in communication, in relationships, is all about being willing to change their behaviour. Now, those three areas of psychological research were prominent in the first half of the 19th century. Come about the 1950s, and we see the first ray of looking at people as people, or looking at people potentially as in a positive approach. And so we have the emergence of what's called humanistic psychology. And this is renowned by people such as Carl Rogers, who coined the phrase unconditional positive regard. So that was regard for the human being and for what they were doing, whether it was right or wrong, but it was serving a purpose for them. And it was serving indeed what Maslow would call needs or wants. So whether they needed to behave in a certain way or wanted to behave in a certain way. And so simply what we've got there is a fundamental belief in people that are innately good, and that their mental and social problems are simply the result of deviations from that normal inclination to be good. What we have then is also a psychologist working around the Jungian theory, which also has contributed to humanistic psychology, to uncover the unique characteristics of people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviours that make them unique. So they looked at the traits and the characteristics of people, good, bad, or ugly, and how those traits can be aggregated into types of personality. And out of that, we get things like the Myers-Briggs type indicator, then the DISC assessment of personality, leading up to more modern personality assessments like Leadership Circle and other assessment instruments which look at, say, leadership behaviour and how leaders can change their behaviour to be more positive in their environment. And last but not least of the traditional psychologists is the social psychologists. And they focus on the impact that the social environment and group interactions have on individual attitudes and behaviours. So they try to understand and explain how individual thoughts, feelings and behaviours are influenced by observational learning of group and social events, either real, imagined or implied by other human beings. So examples of the influence of social psychology on behaviour include, for example, the Bandura Bobo doll experiment, where in the 1970s he exposed children at Stanford in 3 groups, one to adults actually playing aggressively with a Bobo doll, males and females, hitting and being aggressive. A second group was just allowed to play and the Bobo doll was there in their presence. And the third group was the control group and they were just playing and with no interaction at all. And what he found was that those children in the group who had been exposed to the aggressive play with the Bobo doll then subsequently became more aggressive in their play with the Bobo doll than did children in the other 2 groups. You might also remember the Stanford prison experiment of Zimbardo in the 1970s, which had to be stopped. And this was where psychology experiments recruited psychology students into 2 groups. One were prisoners and one were the guards. And the guards' behaviour became so punitive and so negative that they had to stop the experiment. In a coaching setting, what we do is we work with the client to change their behaviour, but we know that they go back into the same social context. So in addition to helping them to make changes and activate different behaviours, we also talk with them about what's likely to happen when they go back into their social group and how we can then give them scenarios for how they might respond to those different reactions. Because when people want to change their behaviour, oftentimes it changes the whole social system in which they are interacting. And other people in that social system become uncomfortable and try to bring them back to what they consider to be the normal behaviour of that person. And so it's logical that they will have discomfort, the other people in that social system, and may not be supportive of the new behaviours. So it's important that we acknowledge that whenever one person changes their behaviour, it will have a ripple effect into their social environment, and others may be caused discomfort as a result of that. So those are the 6 branches of traditional psychology that impact on and provide the foundational evidence for coaching as we know it today. However, there is a problem with traditional psychology in that it was focused on deviance, abnormality and dysfunction, the things that are going wrong with a person's life. There was no consideration given to the rest of humanity, the rest of the population, which provided the majority, say the other 80, 90% of human beings who were functioning normally, quote unquote, for the most part, although they may have been living unhappy lives. And if you look at some of the research out of the US into happiness and unhappiness and the proportion of people who are happy, what we do see is that only about a third of the US population describe themselves as happy, which leaves a gaping 70% or what is it, 70% who are unhappy, some of whom may be mentally disturbed. But the great majority will just be simply unhappy. That is, able to get out of their discomfort, pessimism, into being more happy and being more optimistic. And the research has correlated that unhappiness factors with things such as, it has not correlated with income or gender. It's certainly not correlated with anything that can be, you can put your hand on, except as Seligman would say later on, if we are ill, we can certainly be happy, but when a second illness hits us, which is quite devastating, that may actually lead us to become unhappy, which is obviously something that we need to consider later on. But the correlation with happiness is found to not be related to income or to gender. However, it has been related to things such as the age groups of the 20s. So people in their 20s seem to be happier, and people in their 60s seem to be happier. And maybe that's due to, you know, impending retirement or something like that, or having lived their life and now being able to relax a little more. It's also been related to traits such as extroversion, but also to an inner peace and calmness that comes from spirituality. And people who are happier have been correlated with living longer. As Laura mentioned, they're healthier, they live longer, they engage in more altruistic behaviours and more acts of random kindness. So what we now will look at is how contemporary psychological practice can be of benefit to more broadly the normal human population. And there we go to entering into positive psychology. So positive psychology is the scientific study of what makes life most worth living. In other words, it's about what's going right in one's life and building on that to achieve greater happiness. The focus is on identifying people's strengths instead of their weaknesses and building on these strengths rather than trying to repair the deficits. In other words, taking the lives of average people to great, and instead of focusing solely on assisting those who are struggling to regain normal. So positive psychology is concerned with three things. It's concerned with positive experiences that we have in life and replicating those again and again to get those endorphins going and generating extreme happiness. So putting yourself in a position where you are creating happiness in your life, whether that's going out for a picnic, whether it's being with family and friends, whether that's engaging in your favourite pursuit, out of work pursuit, or even in work pursuit, if that's what you find happiness in. The second thing it's related to is positive states of mind. So that's just putting yourself in an optimistic position, being grateful for your life and what's happening in your life, having compassion for others, and having a hopeful mental outlook that things are good and can even get better. And this is correlated with increased life satisfaction, with greater well-being, increased self-esteem, and increased self-confidence, that you are able to function happily in your life. And the third thing it's correlated with is positive settings. So, for example, if you're working in an organisation or an institution which applies positive psychology principles, you will be happier. And that's why a lot of new age people today entering work environments will be setting out to discover what's the environment like before they actually decide to apply for a job in that environment. Now, Csikszentmihalyi was one of the first contemporary psychologists to have a look at things like happiness and creativity back in the 1990s. He studied happiness, optimal experience. He looked at the evolving self and how we can evolve into more positive human beings. And he, in particular, looked at the concept of flow, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. He later then teamed up with Seligman, Martin Seligman, in the 2000s to write the first introductory text to positive psychology. But getting back to Csikszentmihalyi, he's probably most noted for his concept of flow. Now, you would know, as he discovered when he looked at artists. Artists can be immersed in what they're doing. They can be immersed for hours on end. Their time can pass without even noticing it. They are so involved in what they were doing in the moment, as Grant and Laura have referred to, being present, fully present in that moment, and not even noticing that they need to eat, they need to sleep. They are so concentrated and focused on what they're doing. And this is the stage that he said is called flow. So there are 6 characteristics, and I've mentioned some of them already, but just let me reiterate those. Being present in the moment, where action and awareness merges, and so you're fully concentrating and present in the task. There is a lack of attention to self, for example, sleeping and eating. There is a sense of personal control of the situation, totally in control of the situation, but a distorted sense of time as it passes and not even noticing it. Experiencing the activity as intrinsically rewarding. And by that, and I should have mentioned that before from a behaviourist perspective, intrinsic motivation is motivation from interior, from ourselves, being proud in what we're doing, being urged on by our own success. It's not having to relate to others and not getting rewards from others. So it's got nothing to do with others. It's about, yes, we like what we're doing, we love what we're doing, and we want to keep doing it because it's just so rewarding and finding that achievement internally within ourselves. However, it really is Seligman who is considered to be the father of contemporary positive psychology. Seligman grew frustrated with traditional psychology's overemphasis on the negative. So much attention was paid to mental illness, to abnormal psychology, to trauma, suffering and pain, and relatively little attention was paid to happiness, to well-being, exceptionalism, strengths, and flourishing. So when he was elected president of the American Psychological Society in 1998, he jumped at the opportunity to alter the direction of the field from such an influential position. He proposed a new branch of psychology with a focus on what is life-giving rather than what is life-taking. His published work addresses areas, and I want to focus on three of these areas in addition to what Laura has mentioned. So three pivotal areas that we look at in coaching, and these are, first of all, learned helplessness. So this is a state in which an individual fails to act because of prior negative experiences. The example that's given from a experimental point of view is of an animal who is caged, and then every time the animal tries to escape from the cage, they are mistreated and they run quickly back into their cage until they get to a state where the door of the cage is opened and they do not even try to escape. So we can relate that to today's situations, particularly in relation to domestic violence, where the victim just remains in that state for a long period of time. But even to things like what's happening today with the reluctance to, say, apply for promotion. If you have been unsuccessful several times, you tend to give up. And even with school children who have not been successful with exams, have exam anxiety. After a while, they tend to give up and say, I'm not going to be any good, I'm not going to do any good at this exam, therefore I won't even try. So that's learned helplessness. And as coaches, we look at those limiting beliefs and the assumptions underlying them and try to take that person into a more positive mental state so that they start to believe in themselves and what they can do rather than focus on what they can't do. Seligman's second major contribution was in explicating the difference between pessimism and optimism. So he proposed that when we are unhappy, we ask ourselves three critical questions, and these relate to permanence, pervasiveness, and personalisation. So the questions that he encourages us to ask ourselves is this situation permanent? Is it going to be with me for the rest of my life? So just let me give you an example, which, for example, a car accident where somebody is disabled, in a wheelchair, unable to walk. And of course, that's a permanent situation. So yes, that's a setback. However, that person can still be optimistic because they have the use of their upper limbs. They can speak, they can walk, they can talk, they can create art, they can write, they can play music. So there is gratitude that can still relate to that unfortunate accident. Is the situation pervasive? Does it relate to all aspects of my life or just some aspects? Well, in this case of the accident, no, it's only some aspects of this person's life that they are disabled from doing, like walking. But they can talk, they can relate. There's other aspects of their life that they can get on with. And the third question is personalisation. Does this relate to just me or does it relate to the general community? So in this case, it is just me. I'm no longer able to walk. I've been disabled, but gee, you know, I can still get out and I can play tennis, I can play basketball, etc. You look at some of the Paralympics and what they have achieved. That is personalised to them and not to the general environment. So by asking those three critical questions, we can discover happiness in life and be grateful for what we are able to do. The third concept of Seligman that he's noted for is about authentic happiness, which he described by the acronym of PERMA, and Laura has gone through that with you in great detail. I might add a few practical examples to that, if you don't mind. So positive emotion, that is getting out of Grant's pity party and choosing Laura's positivity. So what Seligman encourages us to do every day is to, at bedtime or at any time, think of 3 things that went well, that worked well for you in that day. And that could be things like things that you did that you feel proud about, that you've achieved. It could be somebody who has inspired or motivated you and what happened in that experience. Who was it who inspired you? What is it that you've been motivated to do as a result of that? And what has been your significant learning? So we encourage as coaches people to have a journal by their bed, for example, and just take note of 3 things every day that they would like to hang on to and be grateful for. In terms of engagement, Laura presented that quite specifically. It's about doing what we love and preferentially, as Seligman would say, preferentially using our highest strengths to perform the tasks we love to do that give us great joy and happiness. So in other words, doing what we love to do and loving what we're doing. And we can all relate to people, and hopefully yourself, who go to work loving what you do. And it's not really work, it's just enjoying yourself and loving what you do. That's a great state of engagement. Relationships was something that Laura focused on, and I would support her thoroughly in what she's saying about. And Seligman recommended fine-tuning our positive elements of our relationships. Laura took it even further, and I'll go further still by saying, I would encourage you, and we encourage our clients, to only associate with those people who uplift our life, who are positive influences in our life, even to the point of ring fencing those people in your life that you would like to spend more time with, who really support you, who support your changes in behaviour and attitude and traits, etc. And not really taking much time to associate with those who are negative in your life, who don't support you, who don't uplift you, people who are critical, people who are negative. So yes, we all come across them in our day-to-day lives, and yes, we acknowledge them as individuals, we respect them as individuals, but we don't necessarily take on board what they're saying in terms of their approach to life. Finding meaning, Laura mentioned that, something, a bigger, higher order purpose in life. This is key, I think, to who we are and finding our passion in life and finding purpose and leaving a legacy behind, which is partly why I founded the Australian Institute of Positive Psychology, Positive Coaches, based on positive psychology, because this is what I think will be my legacy in life, to help bring more positive psychology coaches through the system and into all walks of community and corporate life. And lastly, achievement. And Seligman would say that determination counts more than intelligence when it comes to achievement. If we are determined to do something and we put persistence into it and we keep going until we are achieving that, then we have done a good job. So let's now turn to how these principles of positive psychology can impact our coaching practice. And let's look first of all at what is coaching. So coaching is facilitating self-awareness of issues and problems concerning clients in their work and personal life, and goals to be achieved. So it is a supportive and encouraging process that utilises the client's existing knowledge and strengths to help them understand their current situation, broaden their horizon, be open to other possibilities, and lead them towards effective, often creative solutions to their problems. Now, be aware that the coaching process, which I'll call pure coaching, is client-led with no predetermined agenda or outcomes, and the coach has no previous knowledge of the client or the situation. So in other words, a client can walk through the door, you don't know them at all, who they are, where they're from, their work or their family situation. That's what I call pure coaching, and you can help them achieve their goals. There's also performance coaching, which is usually conducted in an organisational setting where there are predetermined agendas and outcomes, and that's another way of coaching. And there's also remedial coaching, which we don't touch as positive psychology coaches. It's usually performed by human resource people with individuals who are going down a dismissal path in an organisation. So what I'm talking about here is really pure coaching, and there are 5 principles underlying positive psychology coaching from this perspective. The first principle is that the coach acknowledges the positive worth of the individual, but not necessarily of their behaviour, because that may be the reason they come to be coached. So, for example, if you have a client coming who's into addiction or abuse, that's not the area of coaching, that's an area of specialist counselling. So you acknowledge them, but you would refer them on to counselling for that specific issue that they're confronting. The second principle of positive psychology coaching is that we believe that clients are doing the best they know how at the time, and they just need the coach's support to do even better. So this comes from that positive psychology belief that people are innately good and trying to meet their needs without taking away from other people's needs, that they're innately good and doing the best they know how at the time. The third principle is that solutions lie within the client, and it's the role of the client to help them discover them. So it's about teasing out their creativity, looking at different opportunities and ways that they can solve the problems that are confronting them, looking at what's worked for them, but also what they have learned from what hasn't worked. And this brings us on to the fourth principle. It's about there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So when we have found that this didn't work in this context or this situation, what is it we can do when we review that learning? And what is it we can do then to redo or re-experiment so we can find out more and hopefully solve the situation? And the fifth principle of positive psychology coaching is that there is a positive intention motivating every behaviour and a context in which every behaviour has value. And it's up to us to identify the right context for that behaviour, or else to change the behaviour to fit the context in which that client is operating. So the coach enacts these principles by doing things like facilitating, guiding, not advising, not mentoring, not training, not supervising, asking better questions to assist the client to go where they need to go, rather than telling them what they have found useful in their life. It's about motivating, supporting and encouraging, raising the client up and not putting them down, not judging, not reprimanding them, not blaming or recriminating, and about stimulating thought, creativity and discovery. So breaking down limiting beliefs and encouraging the client to adopt new perspectives. So the aim of coaching is to develop that self-awareness that Grant and Laura have been talking about, out of which comes insight. And it's that insight, that aha moment that you want the client to achieve, where they clarify their situation, they clarify the values that they hold dear, and encourage them to utilise their strengths and not even think about their weaknesses. Coaches don't coach to weaknesses, they coach to strengths. And of course, the coach is working to some basic assumptions at that stage, which relate to the fact that the client is ready to change and learn new behaviours. The client is willing to take risks to learn their new behaviours and possibly fail, which we know is all about getting feedback. That the client has the cognitive ability to self-reflect and self-review. And of course, that's the aim of coaching and the aim of social emotional intelligence, that you want the client to be able to self-review based and develop new self-awareness. That the fourth one is about the client has the skills to follow through on their actions and know, and if they haven't got the skills or the resources, they know where to get them from. Next, we work on the basic assumption that the client has a level of maturity to cope with and manage their new behaviour and possibly new emotions that arise around that new behaviour in the current context, and to work with that new behaviour and new environment and new emotions to integrate that into what they need to do in the future as they go forward. So looking at those principles of positive psychology, let's now look at how those principles guide the practice of coaching. This is the model of coaching that I've developed and that we have, that we teach our students in our institution. It places 2 steps in front of the traditional grow model, which is important to the success of the coaching session. And I'll tell you why. Because they set up the expectations of how coaching will be conducted and the outcomes that can be achieved from coaching. So the first step in the coach model includes the identification of the critical issue that has brought the client to coaching, which is often a problem to be resolved or a goal to be achieved. It assists clients gain clarity on their situation, and it relates to those 4 areas that I mentioned right at the beginning of this presentation. We understand the content of the situation for the client, what's happening for them, the context in which it's happening, the impact on them of the situation, and we also understand their feelings. As well as that, we look at what they have done to resolve the situation and what has worked and what hasn't. There's no judgment, there's no right or wrong. The coach simply listens to the client's story, gets to understand it, and identify the client's coaching needs. If there is a presenting concern that needs to be teased out, the client will delve further and may have to cycle back if that presenting concern leads to deeper issues. The second step is called opportunities, and it involves identifying the goal the client wants to achieve. That is the reason they have come to be coached, and the opportunities that are available to them to achieve this goal. Now, the goal may be specific, such as the client may say to you, I want to save up for a home deposit, for example. Or it could be unclear, which is often the case. I want a better life. The role of the coach is to have the client identify their goal in 8 to 10 words and make it smart. The fewer words, the better, and support the client's creativity to discover the opportunities available to them that they never thought possible. The third step is similar to the GROW model in that the client identifies actions they need to take to achieve the desired outcome. So this is the logical, rational step that only when they get to that step, if they're emotional, don't go there until you've fully explored their emotions with them and helped them to settle down. And remember that once they get to that logical, rational step, the client takes the actions, not the coach. And it's only when the client is absolutely out of actions that the coach can intervene and maybe, with their permission, make some suggestions. The fourth and final step are important additions to the GROW model as well, because they test the client's commitment to taking the actions and identify any possible barriers that need to be addressed before the client practices the new behaviours in their current climate. They place the responsibility for taking action firmly with just the client, but the accountability lies jointly with both the client and the coach. So let's look now at how positive psychology principles apply to coaching practice. Firstly, and there are 5 of them, positive psychology coaching practice aims to reframe the client's mental model of the world from one that is against them into one that is for them, a negative into a positive, and understand how they can take action to create a more positive future. The coach challenges the client's mental model, their underlying assumptions and limiting beliefs, to create an understanding of how they can do things right. Now, if you look at self-determination theory, it proposes that we are in charge of our own thoughts and feelings, and as such, we determine our future. Our personal goals are windows to our well-being as well as our future. Coaches aim to put clients back into the driver's seat, back into control of their life. The second way we practice positive psychology principles is by looking at clients and their mental mindset. A positive mental mindset influences what clients believe they can do rather than what they cannot do. A fundamental tenet of positive psychology is to focus on strengths to promote learning, growth, well-being, and happiness. So coaches work with clients' strengths and don't even consider their weaknesses unless they are hindering progress. A coaching mindset believes in the absolute ability of each individual to create their future as they would want it to be, with encouragement and support from the coach and a healthy dose of realism as well. Third, mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ability that we want to develop in clients so that they notice, they pay attention to and focus on the things that are going right. So they are fully present in the moment with any thought of the past or the future. So we encourage the client to practice mindfulness so that increases their self-awareness, insight, they're able to self-regulate and become more resilient in their life. Fourthly, we look at their self-efficacy. That is their ability to believe in themselves and get past their current limiting beliefs and their failures, and look at what they can do in the future to learn from their past mistakes. Finally, the fifth way we can practice positive psychology coaching is by being open and encouraging the client to be open, honest, and flexible to explore and discover anything new in their life and the environment, how they grow, how they absolute trust in their coach and themselves, as the coach uses skills of active and reflective listening to understand their situation and identify their coaching needs from what the client is saying, but also to use powerful questioning to summarize and surface what they're not saying, what's under the deep subconscious assumptions and beliefs that they're making, and how they can create new learnings from that. Altogether, there's no denial, there's no justification or externalization of blame as the coach works with clients to simply have them accept responsibility for who they are, where they've come from, and what they need to do to determine their future outcomes. So those are the 5 ways that we practice positive psychology coaching. I'll now just summarize and finish off by saying that, in summary, positive psychology coaching aims to assist clients understand their inner world and how it relates to the external world. It helps clients shift their mental model and mindset and learn new ways of behaving and operating in their environment to solve their own problems and achieve their goals. The outcome is that clients lead a fuller, richer, and happier life, whatever that may be for them, which will be different for each person. So thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope it has given you food for thought and maybe generated some observations or questions.
Fantastic. So can you just stop sharing your slides? That'd be fantastic so that we can see you. That's excellent. And I've just asked everyone to drop their questions in. There's been a few questions going as we've been going along. People are thanking you for your presentation. And yeah, so another, I'm just going to keep an eye on that there. You know, what I really loved about it, the conversations that I was having while Suzanne was talking to us, is that people are really seeing this from a few different perspectives. This is what we wanted, you know. So just because you may not be a coach, and there was a number of coaches there, or there were people that are inspired now to become a coach, what I really do in my own life, even though I am a coach, is I love how you can take the principles of coaching and you can actually just use them in your own life. So self-coaching, I believe, is the greatest area of coaching. Okay, now there is a need for external help and support and coaching, particularly around things like accountability. There were people that were picking up on that. However, you can get yourself to the position of wanting to be coached, of needing to be coached, and applying those principles. So what am I saying there? The stuff that Suzanne was just taking us through, we can use that in our daily life, which is what we want to empower you with in this summit. Right now, you'll be having some thoughts, you'll be having some mindsets, some behaviors that aren't serving you, and they're based on the world and the circumstance and where you are right now. So the ability for you to be able to apply the principles of positive psychology and coaching for yourself is going to help you to navigate that. Laura. Suzanne, the next thing that was coming up there is people were asking questions around things like, you know, where do we draw the line? Does a positive psychology practitioner only talk about the positive? And the only answer that I could come up with, and I'll get your answer here, was that no, they're well balanced. However, and they don't just focus on the, you know, the positive side of things at all, because it's that recognition that there are negative things going on. But my understanding is it's using the positive to navigate that negative. What will you add to that?
Thank you. Yes, and thank you for your questions. Very important. I'll address that one first, and then I'd like to go back to the first question that you mentioned, Ralph. Positive psychology doesn't only address the positive. However, the clients that we work with tend to be well functioning in their everyday life. There's no mental issues related to them. And if there are, what we suggest is that there's an immediate referral to counselling and psychologists to actually look at those issues, which are deep-seated. And there may be. And of course, coaching may surface some of those deep-seated issues. So, for example, I know Grant was talking earlier about his early life. And if that comes up when you're coaching someone and it becomes a real issue, they may need to have some counselling around their early life. So don't be afraid to surface that issue But also, I would recommend that if you're not trained, don't go any further than that. Please just immediately refer on to someone who's got the expertise. Otherwise, you could be creating damage and you could be becoming part of the problem, not the solution. Okay, can I just go back to the first person too about these principles of positive psychology? Anyone can apply to their life anywhere, anytime, in any interaction. And that's the beauty of coaching. It's like it's becoming a profession. It's like a meta profession. You know, it's like someone sitting on your shoulder, saying, looking at you and saying, "What am I doing now?" It's about asking yourself those questions. Is what I'm doing now effective? Is it helping others? Is it helping me? And if it's not, what do I need to do about it to change that behavior? So I think the ultimate goal of coaching is to get people to a point where they self-reflect and they self-coach. Because what you don't want to do as a coach is you don't want to create dependency on yourself as a coach. And that can happen. And this, from a counselling perspective, and I've done counselling, I was into short-term counselling. I never wanted to go into long-term therapy, because then it takes control from the client. You always want to give control back to the person. You want to put them back in the driver's seat to understand their life and their issues. And then you want them to have I know what I need to do. And so it's about them. It's not about the coach. It's not about you. So when we go into organizations and we teach coaching skills to leaders and to employees, it's not about you. You're the sounding board. You're the person who holds the mirror up to other people. And they can then say, when you reflect back to them what they've said, "Oh, was that what I really said? I really didn't mean that." Or, "Gee, that gives me an insight into what my life is like. Perhaps I need to make some changes."
Fantastic. Yeah, look, totally agree. And I love how you say that. It's not about taking the reins and keeping hold of them. It's about guiding and navigating. And I see myself as a coach, and I do operate as a mentor as well. But I see the difference there is that I like to call, I'm like a tour guide, bringing them to the next insight that they can then make a decision about. And the benefit for that I see as well is, because codependency is a challenge, where people just keep going back to their therapist or whatever every single month, and then they're just about finished, and the buzzer goes off and they go, "Okay, we'll see you again next week." The benefit as well, though, of getting someone to their own realization is they're more likely to do something about it, because we don't like to be told what to do. We don't like to be managed. So I love how a coach can bring, and I love to see the lights come on people's eyes when they get an insight. And they, I was dealing with a gentleman just last few weeks who had a major issue that he didn't realize that he had in terms of his thinking and his belief, and he was in his 60s. To see someone be able to go, "Wow, I have opened myself up to the coaching, which has allowed me to get that insight and then make a change in my life." That's an amazing gift. So thank you so much. So, Suzanne, thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts for what you've shared with us today. I love how you gave the distinctions between, the normal understanding of psychology and the different levels or different parts of psychology, and then how positive psychology comes in from a different perspective. It's not about an either or, it's about an and. So I love that. And I love how, taking people through a model, a logical journey that they can go on, helps them to be able to navigate and overcome things in their life. So thank you so much. Let's give Suzanne a big round of applause once again. And there have been people asking for slides and this, that, and the other. I will be sending out a correspondence, an email to everyone. So make sure that you stay subscribed so that you get those. And we'll make some things available with the recordings that are going to be up for a week or so anyway. So thank you so much, Suzanne. And I look forward to having a chat with you a bit later. And let's everyone show their appreciation right now in the chats. Let's give her some love, and we shall move on to the next part of our summit. Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzanne. People are saying excellent presentation. Love that. And we shall allow Suzanne to go now, and I'm just clicking buttons. You just, yeah.
I'll click my leave.
Not good. It's not good. I'm sorry.
Shall I just click leave?
You can do that. We'll wave to you as you go. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Awesome. Bye. Technology is such a wonderful thing. All right. So that's session 1 almost done. Here's what I'd love you to do right now before we go. I'd love you to type in the question box, in the chat roll. They've all got different names, these things. What's the number 1 insight that you took away for you today? Remember I said at the start, in each of these sessions, what I want you to do is take away one thing. Instead of getting all this information that's overwhelming and doing nothing with it, which is what I used to do, what's one thing that was sparked in you today? You know, it could have been from Suzanne's, where you could have thought, hey, this coaching thing is something that I think I've got in me, and you might want to become a coach. And if you have questions about any of that, just hit reply to any of the emails, that the registration emails, and ask that question. We'll put you in touch with the right people. You know, it might have been in Dr. Laura's session, where you got a greater understanding of what social and emotional intelligence is and how that can help you in your life, or in helping other people in their life. You could be in a leadership position, or you could be in a coaching or a HR or L&D training situation, or you could see that there's a big need for you to get some self-awareness and some self-management in your life. So once again, make sure you hit us up with some questions. There's no deals of the day or anything to give you here. I want to make sure that we can keep that conversation going as well. And it could be something that came out of one of my stories. It could have been something that you related to there. So I'd really love to see, type something in the chat box before you go. That would be amazing. Now, you're on our YouTube channel. We started a YouTube channel for this, and we're going to continue. When I say we, people builders, we're going to continue to bring some more help and support in the form of YouTube lives or videos or whatever. So make sure you slam that subscribe button and the bell so that you get the notifications as well. And we would love to help you. I think this will be a good place for us to be able to come back to, rather than have all these different mediums as well. So let me have a look what we've got here. One of the keys of positive psychology coaching is about reframing the client's model of the world from against them to for them. Yeah, how good was that? Right now, we would be, remiss if we didn't think that people might think the world's against them right now. I just look at my own life and I go, what? Everything just stopped, but having that reframe is so important. Cohesiveness of all the bits I had tried to gather. Clarity in the best way forward as a potential leader. Love that, Denise. Well done. Takeouts for today: managing emotional hijacking, the strategy you shared, Grant, all of Laura's session, and the principles behind positive psychology coaching from Suzanne. Thank you. Swandy, I learned I must deal with negative emotions by using positive psychology, create activities that keep positive emotions. Love that. See, all emotions are good. It's not negative emotions are bad and positive are good, right? Negative emotions are there for a reason. It's about using positive to then navigate them in a healthy way. I absolutely love that. Positive psychology is about using the positive to manage the negative in our lives. Love it. We control our own reality, and it is amazing to bring that to the coaching process. Excellent. So many insights. I'm a happy man right now. All right, there's technology, there's all that stuff to put together. I know just from this first session that this is scratching where people are itching. So I'm so glad that I pulled on my big boy pants and got out of my pity party and got this sorted out for you. So I'm really appreciative of that. So just to wrap this up, we're 2 minutes away from finishing right now, this first session. So just as a reminder, so each day there's a session in Australian time, from Sydney time, from 8 a.m. until 11. We've just done that. So the same time tomorrow, we'll be running another session with different speakers. Also today, though, at 5 p.m. until 8 p.m., so in 6 hours' time, we'll be having session 2, where we've got different speakers again talking about, you know, lots of different things. So we've got the amazing Ivana from Croatia. Just been on Croatian TV. I saw her the other day, so I'm so glad I was able to get her to fit into this. She's going to talk about maintaining your well-being despite current circumstances. How good's that? We really need that right now. I know I do. And then we've got Corrine Burry from Dubai, originally from Lebanon. She's in Dubai. She's talking about the science of empathy and social connections. So need more empathy in the world right now. So that's going to be amazing. Then we've got a really good friend of mine in the UK, Jill Mackay, who's going to talk about the neuroscience of motivation and being able to use that to stay on top in uncertain times. So, hey, if you liked any of this, take a picture of it right now, send it out there in your social media, let people know they can still register, because we'll have the session this afternoon, that same session again tomorrow. So come to whichever sessions fit your lifestyle, and sleep if you do, if you need to, because that's a good thing. That's self-care. You'll be able to get all of these as recordings anyway. So the things that you miss, invite some more people along so that they can register and get involved as well. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your trust in me to bring this summit to you. I'm really appreciative of the fact that, you know, we're all online a lot and you've come and invested in this. So thank you so much. I'm going to sign off now and see you again if you're joining us at 5 p.m. this afternoon when we go into the next session. So if you didn't grab a copy of that process that people are asking you about, just go to the People Builders website, peoplebuilders.com.au. You can find the registration link for your friends up there as well. You can also grab a copy of that Manage Your Emotions ebook if that's something that helps you as well. So enjoy whatever you're doing. If you're going to bed now, have a great sleep. If you're in Australia here, enjoy what you're doing during the day. No matter where you are in the world, we really look forward to investing some more time with you later in the day. So we'll see you then. Bye for now.